A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. It started as an innocent Saturday dinner at my place, a gathering of friends to unwind after a long week. I had just moved into this charming little apartment downtown, and my excitement to show it off had reached a peak. The scent of garlic and lemon wafted through the air as I grilled some delicious veggie skewers and sautéed shrimp for those who weren't adhering to special diets. Among the group was Lisa, my close friend since college, who had recently identified as pescatarian after not touching red meat for years. I respected her choice, but I knew her habits could sometimes waver in social settings, especially with good food around. It was almost comical how she would swoon over my culinary decisions, her large brown eyes lighting up with excitement at each platter I presented. As the evening unfolded with laughter and wine, I watched her dive into the shrimp with an enthusiasm that bordered on reckless. It was amusing until it suddenly struck me, an unsettling thought, as if a fog had drifted into my usually clear mind. "Hey, Lisa," I said, attempting to tease her lightly, "you know if you eat that, you might as well wave goodbye to your pescatarian label." Everyone laughed, but I was only half joking. I could see the glimmer of guilt in her eyes flicker and fade as she popped another shrimp into her mouth. The atmosphere shifted slightly, we all resumed our chatter, but I could sense her internal struggle bubbling beneath the surface, like the tension of a taut string ready to snap. Eventually, the night made its inevitable descent into messy revelations, and we all plopped down on the couch, a few drinks in hand. That's when she admitted it. "You know," she began hesitantly, "sometimes, I wonder if I really want to be pescatarian. The way everyone went to town on your food tonight. I felt like I was missing out." It was clear that she was wrestling with herself. She'd always been passionate about her choice for ethical reasons, yet every time she encountered temptation, she felt more and more conflicted. I sighed, struggling with the gravity of what I was about to say. I didn't want to sound harsh, but the truth was nagging at me. "Look, Lisa," I started, choosing my words carefully, "it's your choice, and I respect it, you know that. But if you can't resist shrimp on occasion and it's giving you this much anxiety, maybe you need to reevaluate why you're doing it. It's okay to admit you want to enjoy food, even if it doesn't fit into one label or another." The room fell quiet, the air thickening with unspoken sentiment, and I could feel the weight of my statement sinking into my gut. I could read her face like a book: confusion, frustration, anger. She snapped back, "So, it's my fault I ate meat? Thanks for making me feel like a monster." That stung, more than I expected it would. I felt my heart race, a familiar surge of defensiveness rushing up like a wave. I didn't want to be the villain in her narrative. "No, that's not what I meant," I stammered, my voice softening. "I just think it's important to own our choices, you know? If you're really struggling, maybe it's time to rethink how rigid you want to be." My intentions glimmered under the weight of her hurt, and I regretted my delivery. After a few moments of silence that felt like an eternity, she sighed deeply, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. "I guess. It just feels hard sometimes, navigating these choices in a world full of delicious foods. Maybe I need to reconsider how I label myself," she admitted, her voice quieter. I could sense we both were still processing. It was complicated, like a beautiful, messy tapestry of feelings engaged in an unresolvable dance. Later that night, as the remnants of our feast lay scattered around us and we finally drifted into lighter conversations again, I felt a poignant shift. I wasn't sure if my words had genuinely struck a chord, but something shifted in her demeanor. I realized that, in trying to signal her toward her own truth, I hadn't meant to reprimand her. Instead, it felt like we were both involved in a delicate dance of self-discovery, two friends navigating the overpowering waves of guilt and desire in a chaotic sea of culinary choices. Months later, I received a text from her. "Hey, started trying some new things in the kitchen too, like I'm experimenting with being less strict with my vegetarianism. Thanks for that night, really." I smiled at the screen, relieved. It reaffirmed something vital. We weren't just friends tossing around labels, we were evolving together, reshaping our identities and learning to embrace the shades of gray instead of the rigid divisions we'd created. It was early evening when I received that text, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting my living room a soft gold. I could feel the warmth wrap around me like a familiar blanket, but there was a strange intensity bubbling inside. I was relieved, yes, but a part of me couldn't help but gnaw on the edges of that moment. The weight of our past conversation lingered. I remembered how tense it had felt after she took that first bite of steak at the grill, the way her eyes widened in disbelief and almost guilt, like she'd broken an unspoken rule. "You know it's not just steak, right?" It's about understanding our choices, I'd said, words spilling out before I caught myself. I felt like a counselor and a friend at once, grappling with my own frustrations about rigidity and rules in a friendship that should have room for exploration. That night, our laughter had mingled with the smoke from the grill, but the air had also been thick with an unaddressed tension. I found myself worrying how our culinary debate had left her feeling. Yet here she was now, admitting that she had begun playing with those rigid lines we once underlined so boldly. I felt a sense of pride wash over me, an unexpected warmth to see her moving past the guilt that had shadowed her for months. I typed back, careful yet upbeat, really? That's awesome. It's about what feels right for you, not what we think it should be. I hit send and slumped back into the couch, heart racing slightly. It reminded me of that old saying, to be true to oneself, but how hard it can be. I often struggled with that truth too and realized that questioning things, especially our choices in domains as personal and emotive as food, was not just a trait of culinary exploration, it was a manifestation of a larger conversation about identity. I glanced at my half-empty plate from dinner, the remnants of my own dietary decisions. I'd been having seafood, mostly, saving myself from the more unpalatable choice of red meat. Was it that different from her shift? Is it really just about the food, or is it about comfort in the chaos of adulthood, growing, bending, and reshaping ourselves? Days turned into weeks, and those philosophical inquiries played in my mind as background music, mingling with the sweet aroma of my kitchen experiments. I swiped through my social media later and saw her post, an impeccable plate of sautéed vegetables with shrimp, vibrant and mouthwatering. The caption read, "Just because I love plants doesn't mean I can't embrace a bit of the sea, right?" I chuckled, an involuntary sense of triumph swelling in my chest. She was molding her narrative and allowing the waves of culinary joy to drown out the self-imposed storms of guilt. It made me want to push my boundaries too. Perhaps I could venture into vegetarian dishes beyond my comfort zone. Somewhere in that back and forth of support and experimentation, we found ourselves interwoven, each dish a tile in a mosaic of our friendship. I realized that her choice, or the softening of her restrictions, didn't negatively impact our connection, it only deepened it. One weekend, we agreed to cook together again, a full few hours reserved for culinary exploration. As we diced and chopped, we talked freely, about our lives, our aspirations, the uncertainty swirling around us like the steam from the pans. By the time we tasted our third dish, the vulnerability we both carried transformed into a playful banter. "So if I make my famous crab cakes next week, can you handle the temptation?" she teased, and I couldn't help but throw my head back in laughter. Temptation? Oh, come on. I'll still be here, side by side, in this delicious gray zone, I replied. And suddenly, it felt less like a debate and more like exploration, a shared journey through choices seasoned with genuine care and understanding. I leaned on the counter, ready to whisk my hands into the next dish, feeling our friendship getting thicker, hearty like the meal we were about to create. Life is messy, and the lines are often blurred, but in that kitchen, amidst laughter and the inviting aroma of shared meals, I felt alive, truly, deeply alive. I couldn't predict the future, or if she'd return to a stricter vegetarian path, but I realized it hardly mattered. We were simply living, exploring, shaping ourselves with each meal shared, every step an invitation to experience the beautiful chaos together. That afternoon, with sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, I felt an overwhelming sense of connection to my friend. As I set about chopping vegetables, bright peppers, fragrant garlic, and crisp spinach, I could practically sense her presence beside me. We had planned to conjure up a new recipe together. We called it Meal Assembly Gone Wild, an excuse to toss everything we had on hand into one big bowl and see what happened. It wasn't just about food, it was a metaphor for where we were in life, melding our separate journeys into something vibrant, unique, and delicious. Just as I reached for the onions, my thoughts drifted back to that fateful dinner months ago, when she had taken a forkful of the salmon, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is so good, but what if I regret it later?" she asked, laughter bubbling just under the surface of her conflicted expression. Now, with each clatter of the pan and splash of sauce, I realized we had both changed since that night. We had stepped away from rigid definitions and found invigorating freedom in playing with the rules. "Hey, maybe we could throw in some shrimp for a little kick?" I called out to her, eyebrows raised playfully. She hesitated for a moment, as if weighing the imaginary scales of her vegetarianism before nodding eagerly. "Yeah, why not? Let's do it." And just like that, we tumbled deeper into our culinary exploration, an unwritten agreement forming in the air between us, that this space was safe for experimentation, for letting go, for embracing the pleasure of the unexpected. As the aromas mingled and enveloped us, rich and enticing, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window, her smile wide as she mixed ingredients with wild abandon. It echoed the joyful spirit this journey had instilled in her. There was a new confidence in the way she moved, a contrast to the uncertainty that used to shroud her culinary choices. I felt proud, not just of our dish, but of her bravery to navigate the ambiguity of her identity. It felt like we both were adding layers to ourselves, new textures and flavors that complemented who we had always been at our core. "Do you think this would make a good post for the blog?" she asked, tossing a playful strand of hair over her shoulder. She loved sharing our culinary escapades online, a creative outlet that gave her an avenue to connect with others exploring similar paths. I nodded, grinning. "Absolutely. And we can call it Dancing with Delicacies, a pescatarian journey or something cheeky like that." Our laughter rang through the kitchen, warm and easy, a reminder that moments like these were worth cherishing. As we plated our creation, the vibrant colors inviting and bold, I felt a warmth blossom in my chest, a realization that this friendship had transformed into something richer than I ever anticipated. We had wandered outside the boundaries we once imposed on each other and found a deeper bond through the art of sharing meals. It was about honoring our individual choices while still celebrating every messy, beautiful meal we pulled together. Later, as we sank into the clinking of forks against plates, I took a moment to observe her. She was savoring each bite, letting flavors linger on her tongue as memories intertwined with our laughter. I suddenly felt the urge to share something, an acknowledgement of our journey, our vulnerability. "You know," I said, looking straight at her, "I didn't want to tell you how to feel about your food choices, but I did want you to know it was okay to explore. You remind me that life doesn't come wrapped up in neat packages." Her gaze softened, and after swallowing, she replied with a thoughtful nod. "And you remind me that it's okay to step beyond the labels we put on ourselves. This journey with you is exactly what I needed, to stop fearing the gray areas." Our conversation ebbed and flowed across the table just like the food, intertwining and rich. As we cleaned up, I reflected on how, for each forkful we took, it was more than just a fusion of flavors, it was a celebration of friendship, acceptance, and the beautiful mess of growing together. I didn't know where her culinary exploration would lead next or how her relationship with food and identity would continue to evolve, but I felt a sense of calm in the uncertainty. We were both learning to embrace the chaos and quirks of life without the need for rigid definitions, a true friendship woven tighter with every meal shared. I've always prided myself on being a generous person, but the last few months have turned that belief on its head, and now, I find myself questioning my own values. My girlfriend, Rachel, and I had been together for just over a year when she broached the subject of her kids needing cars. Now, let me clarify, Rachel has 2 children from a previous marriage, Jenna, who is 15, and Max, who is 13. From the moment I met them, I felt an instant bond. Jenna had this fierce spirit, often caught between her childhood and looming adulthood, while Max was a whirlwind of energy, always looking to make people laugh. Sharing time with them was pure joy. Yet, as Rachel's kids got older, the conversations inevitably shifted to the need for independence. They wanted their own rides to school, friends' houses, and extracurricular activities. It was an ordinary Thursday when Rachel casually said, "You know, I've been thinking the kids really need cars to be more independent. Wouldn't it be great if we could pick something up for them?" At first, I chuckled, thinking she was joking. Surely, she didn't expect me to dive into a discussion about buying 2 cars just like that. But when I saw the look on her face, half serious, half hopeful, I realized this was no lighthearted suggestion. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach as I recalled my own struggles. I was still paying off student loans and saving to start a life of my own. I hesitated, my mind racing through various possibilities, trying to balance my own financial responsibility with the desire to support Rachel and her family. The conversation became heated, but I remained calm. "Rachel, I love your kids, but I can't afford to buy them cars. It's just not realistic for me," I explained, choosing my words with care. She seemed taken aback, disappointment settling in her eyes. "I thought we were in this together," she said softly, and I felt an unwelcome sting of guilt. It wasn't just the idea of cars, it was the unspoken tension between a partner who wanted to share burdens and a guy who was barely keeping his head above water. Over the following weeks, the tension lingered. I noticed subtle changes in Rachel's demeanor. She became quieter, often lost in thought. On one occasion, while driving back from a family dinner, Jenna asked casually if I was going to buy them cars. I felt a sharp pang in my heart, not wanting to disappoint her but also knowing how strained my finances were. "It's complicated, Jenna," I replied, hoping to deflect. The laughter we used to share felt overshadowed by unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. Around this time, I took a hard look at myself and the relationship. I adored Rachel, and these kids meant the world to me, but it seemed I was inadvertently stepping into roles I wasn't ready for. I loved that Rachel envisioned a future where we united our families, but I had to be cautious about my own needs too. I chose to clear the air. "Rachel," I said one evening, taking her hand. "I care about you and your kids, but I also have to think about my financial goals. I'm not saying I won't help out in other ways, like giving rides or supporting them, but I can't commit to buying them cars." As I confessed my frustrations, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Rachel listened quietly, her expression shifting from disbelief to understanding. "I get it," she said finally, her voice softening. "Sometimes I forget you're still figuring things out for yourself." I could sense the relief in her voice when we turned the corner, leaving anger and disappointment behind. From that point forward, our relationship evolved. I started finding ways to help Jenna and Max without putting myself in financial jeopardy. We worked on small projects together, and I even taught them how to save up for things they wanted. Months later, I received a message from Rachel that made my heart swell. "The kids are working on their savings for cars. I think they've adopted your advice," she wrote, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of them taking initiative. As we sat together that night, reminiscing over our journey, it became clear that we had come a long way. Though my situation hadn't changed much financially, I was at peace knowing we had built a stronger bond through honesty and support. Reflecting on it all, I found comfort in the notion that relationships aren't about merely giving, they're about growing together through adversity. I had feared being seen as selfish, but in the end, what transpired reaffirmed a truth: it's important to recognize one's own limits and communicate openly. I was still part of their lives, just in a different role. And as I fell asleep that night, I felt grateful for the love we had cultivated amid uncertainty, looking forward to all the moments yet to come. Update: a few weeks later, Rachel and I sat down with Jenna and Max to discuss plans for their first car. Instead of just handing them cash, we organized a small family project, painting and refurbishing an old car Rachel's parents had. The kids were ecstatic and learned invaluable skills throughout the process. Watching them work on something they could own ignited a sense of pride in them, but more importantly, it strengthened our bond as a family. In the end, it was about much more than just the cars. It was a lesson in responsibility, independence, and support that we would all carry forward. As the days turned into weeks, our little project blossomed into something more than just a car refurbishment. It became a way for Jenna and Max to understand the value of hard work and teamwork, lessons that would follow them into adulthood. The garage was filled with a blend of laughter and the occasional argument over color choices, tools, and who was in charge of what task. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, feeling like a part of something bigger as I watched Rachel cheer them on, wiping her hands on an old rag and beaming with pride. One Saturday, I suggested that we decorate the trunk with positive affirmations. Each kid could choose a quote that inspired them. Jenna picked "Believe in yourself," while Max, still a bit of a jokester, went with "I fixed it, so I own it." Rachel and I scrambled to find some old paint and brushes, and soon the trunk of the car emblazoned with their chosen words became a family masterpiece. The act of creating something that was truly theirs, a canvas on wheels, made Jenna and Max light up in ways that store-bought gifts never could. I remember one afternoon, after splashing paint around and making ridiculous faces while trying to channel my inner artist, Jenna turned to me with her bright blue eyes shining. "Will you help us do this again someday?" she asked, her voice earnest. I nodded, caught up in the moment. "Absolutely. This can be the first of many projects. We'll build cars, tree houses, or even go-karts, whatever you can think of." The commitment struck me as I spoke. The weight of my words settled in my chest, but it also felt electric, like I was weaving threads into our growing fabric of family. As the weeks continued to pass, we worked diligently, putting in time every weekend, replacing parts, and learning about the engine. I took on the heavier, more technical parts while Rachel guided the kids through the finer points of sanding and painting. Each task was a chance for Jenna and Max to ask questions, and for us to share stories of our own youthful follies, like the time I managed to get my first car stuck in a mud pit because I thought four-wheel drive meant you could drive anywhere. One evening, while we cleaned up after a particularly messy painting session, I was surprised to see a glimmer of uncertainty appear in Jenna's eyes. She had always been the more confident of the two, but tonight, something was off. "Are we doing it wrong?" she muttered, glancing at the splatters of paint that dotted the ground, some bold strokes that had landed on her shirt. It struck me then just how important this whole experience was to her. If the car didn't turn out perfect, would that mean we had failed some unspoken test? I knelt down beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "What do you think?" I asked gently. "Does it feel like we're working together? Are you having fun?" She frowned for a moment, staring at the paint on her shirt and considering. "Yeah, but the car needs to look perfect." "Jenna," I said softly, "life isn't about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and having fun along the way." I watched as the words sank in, her expression slowly shifting toward relief and understanding, like the clouds lifting after a storm. Finally, the day came when we would unveil the refurbished car. We had all worked tirelessly, and the anticipation electrified the air as we gathered in the driveway for the big reveal. The sun shone down, catching the bright colors that adorned the car's surface in a way that made it look almost magical. Rachel stood beside me, her hand clasped in mine, her eyes glistening with excitement. Jenna and Max stood in front of the vehicle, their faces a mixture of disbelief and sheer joy, and as they reached out to touch their creation, I felt a surge of pride that ran deeper than I expected. Jenna joined Max in jumping up and down, squealing with happiness, and Rachel and I exchanged a glance, a silent confirmation of what we had built together, not just in terms of the car but within our family unit. I knew this was a moment they would remember, a fragment of time marked by laughter, creativity, and the unwavering bond we shared. Later, as we took turns behind the wheel on a quiet street, what struck me wasn't just the shiny paint or the engine purring, it was the way Jenna and Max discussed their plans for their driving future, each word a reflection of their blossoming maturity and sense of responsibility. I couldn't help but smile, thinking back to the conflict I had initially faced regarding whether or not I should buy them cars. The struggle had been real, but what we gained was immeasurable. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me, a warmth that spread from my chest to my fingertips. In teaching them the value of ownership and effort, I found that I was learning alongside them. Suddenly, our pastime projections morphed into a bonding experience, a way for Rachel and I to not only build cars but to build a family, brick by cherished brick. A week later, I received a message from an old coworker who wanted to update me about a job opening. The idea of returning to work jostled around in my brain, but I barely thought about it. Something deeper was stirring within me. The realization that I didn't need a high-paying job to feel fulfilled came to me like a whisper. I had discovered a different way to be present, engaged, and genuinely happy. Although our yard was filled with laughter from our car projects, I had also conjured an understanding that family was not just defined by blood, but by the memories we created together. Several months later, as our car adventures continued to unfold, Jenna and Max decided they wanted to do something special for Rachel and me. One afternoon, they surprised us with a picnic in the park, complete with sandwiches and homemade cookies that had some very creative, but slightly chaotic icing. We laughed as they took charge of the basket, and as we settled down beneath a tree, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As I watched the kids run around, their laughter a melody of joy, I realized that I would never trade these moments for material things. I might not have given them cars without conditions at first, but I had given them the tools to navigate life more effectively, which would prove to be far more valuable in the long run. Reflecting on everything, I realized that though my initial hesitation stemmed from wanting to be a responsible adult rather than a flashy type, it had led to something far more profound, and although I would probably always be the one saying, "Let's paint the trunk," I had also become the dad who could tell a joke, share genuine pieces of wisdom, and make memories that would last a lifetime. Sometimes, I would hear Jenna and Max reminiscing about our adventures, and I couldn't help but feel that we were building not just a family of the future but a legacy, one filled not just with cars but with the cherished stories of our lives. As the days passed, our weekends became filled with laughter, paint splatters, and the smell of motor oil, a unique blend of chaos and joy that transformed our garage into a makeshift workshop and a haven for memories. Rachel would often send me gentle nudges of encouragement as I attempted to wield a wrench while Jenna and Max handled the power tools with surprising finesse. Each time they'd succeed in fastening a bolt or sanding down a rough edge, their smiles would widen, the joy resonating in their eyes as if they'd just conquered a mountain. These moments were powerful reminders of how quickly they were growing up, and each project fueled my desire to be more present and supportive in their lives. One evening, as dusk began to settle in, we found ourselves sprawled out on an old blanket we'd tossed in the trunk while we waited for paint to dry. The kids shared their dreams. Jenna wanted to travel the world and write stories of her adventures, while Max, always the jokester, mused about becoming a famous comedian. As I listened, I realized that this experience was about more than just cars. It was forging a foundation for their ambitions and aspirations. Weeks later, the old car began to transform. It was no longer just a rusted frame. It became a vibrant representation of teamwork, laughter, and shared sweat. We painted it in bold blues and cheerful yellows, mixing colors as if each swirl of paint was a thread in the tapestry of our newly formed family. Friends and neighbors stopped by, often asking if they could lend a hand, turning our small project into a community affair. One Saturday afternoon, while the kids and I painted the hood, Rachel appeared with freshly baked cookies, and her eyes sparkled with pride as she watched us. I felt a warmth in my chest knowing that I was no longer just a boyfriend to her. I had evolved into a partner and a father figure, nurturing the lives around me with kindness, patience, and a whole lot of love. When the project finally reached completion, the sense of accomplishment was palpable. The day we unveiled the finished car was nothing short of magical. Jenna and Max jumped up and down, their faces lit with astonished delight as we took a family picture beside the newly restored vehicle. However, with this joy came an underlying anxiety rooted in my mind. Would they expect the same kind of effort and commitment forever? What if life became too busy, or what if the bond we had nurtured began to unravel? I discussed these uncertainties with Rachel one quiet evening when the kids were snugly tucked in. We illuminated the room with soft light, a warm cup of tea in hand, and she shared a reassuring sentiment. "It's normal to worry," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "But remember, it's not about the cars or the crafts. It's about creating a space where they feel valued and supported, whether it's with paintbrushes or just by listening to their hopes. They'll remember the love, not just the projects." Her words resonated deep within me, and I realized she was right. These kids, Jenna and Max, were resilient and adaptive, just as life would need them to be. My role wasn't to guarantee a perfect scenario constantly but rather to be their constant support through life's uncertainties. As days turned to months, I witnessed their confidence blossom, not just in their abilities with mechanics but also in their schoolwork and friendships. They naturally began taking leadership roles among their classmates, eagerly engaging in school projects. Each time they tackled a new challenge, I felt a surge of pride that they might carry the values we cultivated through our weekend car projects into the rest of their lives, providing a sense of direction only strengthened by the love we built together. Reflecting on this journey, I found clarity in accepting my title as dad in their lives, embracing the role with open arms. As winter approached, and car maintenance became less frequent, we shifted our focus to indoor projects. Jigsaw puzzles and game nights filled the house with energy. The old car stood proudly outside, an emblem of our collective achievements and the dawning of a familial bond that felt everlasting. I often pondered the future but found comfort in knowing that our legacy would consist of more than material objects. It would be woven with the stories of resilience, compassion, and unwavering support that would carry us through any trials that lay ahead. Update: fast forward several years, and the old car became a treasured memento. Jenna and Max took it to prom with their friends, painted stars on the roof, and filled it with memories I knew would last them a lifetime. And as Rachel and I watched them drive off into the night, her hands securely clasped in mine, I felt overwhelming gratitude for every moment, good and bad, that had brought us here, a beautifully imperfect family, ready to face the world together, one adventure at a time. I never thought I would find myself in the midst of such chaos, but there I was, sitting on the edge of my bed before the door swung open and my best friend, Clara, rushed in, her face flushed with a mixture of anger and panic. It was a rainy Wednesday, the kind of day that makes you want to curl up with a book and forget the world outside, but today was different. Today marked 3 months since Clara's boyfriend, Ryan, had walked out, leaving her broken-hearted and desperate for answers that I had a sinking feeling she would never find. For years, I had stood by her through this tumultuous journey of love and heartache, but the truth was that I'd grown tired of her constant excuses, of the way she seemed to repeatedly brush aside her culpability in the relationship's unraveling to cling to her victim narrative. Ryan had been a good man, scrupulously faithful, but I'd watched the way Clara would flirt with him during parties, the subtle yet unmistakable invitations that would lead to late-night phone calls where she would complain about how distant he had become. I felt the weight of my own silence pressing down on me, which was why, on that rainy evening, when Clara burst into my room, I finally found the words I had been holding back for months. "Clara, can we talk?" I asked gently, hoping to soften the blow. As the words left my mouth, I felt a storm brewing within me, It was time to address the elephant in the room, no matter how much I dreaded what might unfold. Clara plopped herself onto my bed, a worn-out tear-streaked pillow held tightly against her chest as she anxiously ran her fingers through her tousled hair. "I just can't understand why he left, you know? I did everything for him," she lamented, her voice thick with helplessness. I looked into her eyes, swimming with confusion, and wondered how many times I had already fed her excuses, how many nights I had indulged her tales of woe without ever once saying what I really thought. "Maybe if you had just," I started, my voice betraying my hesitation, but she interrupted me with a wave of her hand. "What? If I had just what? Let him do whatever he wanted while I sat on the sidelines watching?" The accusation hung in the air like a heavy fog. It was then I understood I had to tread carefully. "Clara," I said slowly, choosing my words with as much care as I could. "I think if you hadn't always tried to get with him, maybe he wouldn't have left you." The moment the words spilled out, the tension crackled like electricity between us. Clara's expression morphed from hurt to outrage. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind as she struggled to process my blunt honesty. "How could you say that? You're my best friend. Aren't you supposed to support me?" I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a lingering urge to defend my stance. I reminded myself that friendship sometimes required uncomfortable truths, sometimes it meant risking the bond for something more substantial. "I am supporting you, but it feels like you've never truly seen how your actions have affected your relationships. It's not just about what Ryan did, it's about us taking accountability too." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken words. Clara's gaze fell to her lap, and for a moment, I thought I'd lost her for good. It was then she looked back up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was a look of vulnerability that I had rarely seen. "Maybe you're right," she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. "Maybe I need to reevaluate how I treat the people I love." I felt an unexpected relief wash over me. Often, the hardest conversations turn out to be the most necessary. We spent the rest of the evening talking in quiet tones, not eliminating the possibility of her feelings but rather exploring them, digging into the roots of her behavior. Each shared memory seemed to stitch us back together, slowly mending the cracks that had begun to spread between us. Weeks passed, and as Clara began to explore some of her choices in therapy, I too found myself reflecting on our friendship. It became clear to me that I hadn't only been a friend to Clara, I had also held on to her anger to shield my own insecurities. I called Ryan one evening, just to check in, and surprisingly, he was open to talking. He spoke about how difficult the breakup had been for him, acknowledging the tension between the three of us. It was strange to see another person's hurt mirrored in my own thoughts. After all, hadn't all of this stemmed from a place of miscommunication? Maybe we all had a part to play in this tangled web. In the end, our friendships deepened but morphed into something new. Clara found solace in a different place of strength, and Ryan began to explore his own journey of healing. And me? I learned that sometimes addressing uncomfortable truths is a pathway to a better understanding of ourselves and the relationships we value the most. Months later, when I invited Clara to talk again, I could tell we were two friends who had survived a storm together. "You know," she said with a wistful smile. "That was a real turning point, wasn't it?" I nodded, feeling the warmth between us, the shared strength formed through honesty and confrontation, a bond that, while bruised, had somehow been made stronger. And maybe, just maybe, we would find our way back to laughter and light, as friendships are prone to do. I sat with her in that quiet moment, reflecting on how rain often gives way to the sun. The experience wasn't just about blame or regret, it was a hard lesson in growth, empathy, and the importance of holding each other accountable as we navigate this unpredictable thing called love. The silence lingered, comfortable yet heavy, as we both processed everything that had been said. I glanced out the window, noticing the rain had finally ceased. It felt like a metaphor for our turbulent conversation, a storm that had passed, leaving behind a kind of clarity. "You know," I said softly, breaking the quiet, "you might not want to hear this, but part of me is glad this happened." Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion, and I quickly added, "Not because of the pain, but because it forced us to confront the things we usually sweep under the rug." She turned to me, her expression softening as she nodded, a hint of understanding dancing in her eyes. We were two souls tangled in a web of relationships, me, the one who had tried to help her see where her actions were leading, and her, the one who had, perhaps unknowingly, steered her life into choppy waters. We spoke for hours, delving into her relationship with Jake, her boyfriend, and the heartache that had been crippling her since he left. I listened as she recounted the moments that led to their unraveling, the desperation to feel wanted battling against the impulses that drove her to seek affirmation in places it didn't belong. Every time I thought about you and Tyler laughing together, it made me feel like I was missing something, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It was an admission filled with vulnerable honesty that echoed in the quiet of my living room, sinking into the spaces where judgment had dissolved. As our conversation unfolded, I realized that not only was I trying to disentangle her from her own thoughts, but perhaps also from my lingering resentment over how her actions had affected my life. Eventually, the air shifted from confrontation to appreciation, as she thanked me for pushing her to see the reality of her choices. "You saved me from myself, you know that?" she said, her voice laced with gratitude. I felt a surge of warmth at her acknowledgement, a soothing balm on the wounds that had formed from the conflict. "Sometimes you need someone to be honest with you, even if it stings," I replied, wishing she understood how difficult it had been for me to say the words I had spoken. The evening wore on, and with every moment we shared, the shadows of our past began to recede, illuminating the path before us. On a whim, I suggested we consider starting a book club together, something that had been a long-standing joke between us. The idea was met with a laugh, and just like that, we transitioned from heavy-hearted discussions to playful banter about what books we might choose. It was a brilliant revelation, the whimsical notion of stories to share and discuss drawing us back into the familiar rhythm of our friendship, leaving our deeper troubles behind, if only for a moment. As the night wore on, I felt the worry of aftermath slowly lift, maybe the storm had truly passed. I turned off the lights, wrapping us both in the cozy familiarity of warm blankets and the faint scent of chamomile tea wafting through the air. It was in those shared breaths, wrapped in comfort, laughter, and the reverberating echoes of our goodbyes to hurt, that I finally dared to hope. Perhaps building back our friendship wouldn't just be a chore, but an adventure, one step at a time. After all, every story of conflict can lead to new beginnings. When I later wrote my post on the AITA thread, I framed it not just around the tumult of those moments but also around the evolution of our bond. It truly is a testament to how love, in all its forms, can ultimately rise from the very ashes of pain. And as I hit submit, I felt a wave of catharsis wash over me, a sense of closure for what had been. The comments that followed, filled with support and shared stories, became a living testament to the resilience of relationships, no matter how strained they may become. Hours later, as I finally drifted off to sleep, I clung to the thought that even the heaviest rainstorms make way for the brightest dawns, and perhaps this new dawn was the beginning of something beautiful for both of us. As I slipped into the soft embrace of sleep, my mind swirled with hopeful visions of the days to come, where laughter would find its way back into our conversations and the lingering shadows of doubt would fade into a distant memory. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, casting delicate patterns on the floor, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I awoke with a sense of peace that seemed to linger just outside my consciousness, waiting to be acknowledged. I reached for my phone, half expecting a cascade of notifications, but found only a solitary message from Sarah, my best friend. It read simply, "Can we talk?" I could sense the apprehension in those 3 words, a quiet echo of all the unsaid apologies hanging between us. While I was eager to engage, I also felt a tightening in my chest at the thought of another difficult conversation. What would I say? Did I even know how to approach it? Taking a deep breath, I replied with a tentative, "Of course, when and where?" We decided to meet at our favorite cafe, a small, cozy place adorned with whimsical decor and the intoxicating aroma of fresh pastries. Arriving a bit early, I perched on a low stool, my heart thudding in anticipation of what would unfold. When she walked in, she appeared almost ethereal, the sunlight catching the strands of her hair, framing her face like a soft halo. Yet, beneath that radiant exterior, I recognized the shadows of uncertainty etched in her expression. She slid into the seat across from me, and we exchanged hesitant smiles, as if testing the waters after a storm. "I'm really sorry," Sarah began, her voice shaky but sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about how selfish I was, and I don't know how I let it get that far." I wanted to jump in, to assure her that we would be okay, but something inside urged me to let her voice her feelings first. "So," I nodded, prompting her to continue. "It's just. I guess I wanted what you had, without realizing the toll it would take on our friendship." "I know I hurt you," she said, her eyes glistening. There was pain in her words, a raw honesty that cut through the layers of our past. I felt something within me soften as I listened. It dawned on me just how much she had been struggling with her insecurities, having always looked up to the love I shared with my husband. "You were caught in a fantasy, just as I was," I replied softly. It's hard to separate our desires from reality, and trust me, I've had my fair share of doubts. I thought things would always be perfect, but things change. We talked for hours, layers of misunderstanding peeled away like the soft petals of a spring blossom, revealing the roots of our friendship still intact beneath the surface. It felt refreshing to vent, to listen, and to empathize as we shared our past victories and losses, reinforcing how we had each found ourselves longing for something we had overlooked, the prioritization of our friendship over fleeting moments of jealousy or neglect. As time slipped by, I felt a sense of healing course through me. It wasn't just about reconciling our pasts but also about understanding the deeper roots of our connection. By the time we reached the end of our coffee, I felt as if we had created a new layer in our bond, more resilient than before. So, what now? I asked as we gathered our things, feeling light. I think we should take it slow, just focus on being us again, she mused. Let's just hang out, like we used to without any complications. I grinned, surprised at the weight that had lifted between us. We had learned a hard lesson together, one I hoped would keep us stronger and more connected moving forward. In the days that followed, we slowly began to rebuild our friendship. We went for runs by the river, where we laughed until our sides hurt, cooking together on the weekends, and even picking out movies to binge on lazy afternoons. Each gathering felt therapeutic, stitching together the frayed edges of our lives. I also saw how she began to take a step back from seeking validation in the attention of others and focused more on nourishing her self-worth. It was inspiring, and I felt grateful to witness her growth. Pain, it turned out, was not the end of our journeys but merely a pit stop on the way to something extraordinary. And with each passing day, the sunlight grew brighter, reminding me of how our lives could soften and reshape after a heavy rainstorm. As for my marriage, that too started to flourish. My husband had come to understand the weight of the situation, and we worked on cultivating stronger communication, prioritizing our bond in a way that honored its foundation. Perhaps we were all just learning how to navigate the complexities of love, friendship, and desire, an ongoing journey where every misstep could lead to enlightening perspectives. The day came when I found myself pouring out my heart again in another Reddit post, this time sharing the beautiful progress we had made, casting a brighter light on the lessons of accountability and unconditional support. We're all flawed, I wrote, but embracing each other's flaws can lead to something even more beautiful. It was cathartic, feeling the words tumble out freely, no longer burdened by resentment but buoyed by hope. As I hit submit, I looked out the window at the dawn breaking over the horizon, the colors blending seamlessly together, and for a moment, it felt like I was standing at the brink of an adventure, one built on healing and sincerity. What followed was a stream of encouraging comments and heartfelt messages from fellow Redditors who had experienced their own journeys of reconciliation, and they reminded me that the most difficult paths can lead to unexpected destinations, the small moments of joy, the laughter shared over coffee, and the deepening of true friendship. Just as I had hoped, the rain had brought forth a new dawn, and now, with each gentle wave of connection that rolled in, I understood that sometimes, the darkest storms create the most stunning landscapes. The cold, flickering light of my laptop screen illuminated the dimly lit room, shadows dancing on the walls as I stared at the now infamous executive order on my feed, transgender and non-binary people don't exist. I could hardly believe what I was reading, a wave of disbelief crashing over me, followed by a torrent of emotions I hadn't expected to feel at that moment. As someone who had spent years transcribing the stories of marginalized individuals at a local nonprofit, the implications of such a declaration felt personal. It was as if someone had ripped the very fabric of my work apart. My closest friend, Jamie, had recently transitioned, finally embracing a truth that had been so long suppressed, and I wondered how this declaration affected someone who had only just begun to live authentically. The thought gnawed at me, an unsettling feeling, like a puzzle piece that refused to fit. I picked up my phone and scrolled through social media threads, seeing a mixture of anger, confusion, and sorrow expressed in every post, each one resonating like a silent scream echoing in my own heart. Circling back to Jamie, I could hardly contain my anxiety, so I decided to text him. The three little dots that signify someone is typing seemed to stretch into an eternity. When he finally replied, it was a simple, almost resigned acknowledgement of the order. "It's just another day in the circus, isn't it?" he wrote, an attempt at humor that dripped with bitterness. I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. I could imagine the weight of that moment and how it might feel to have an essential part of your identity dismissed outright. Trying to lift his spirits, I suggested we meet up for coffee, to talk through things. He agreed, and despite the heaviness of the situation, I felt a glimmer of hope at the thought of seeing him. When we met later that afternoon, the coffee shop was alive with the comforting buzz of conversation and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Jamie sat across from me, his eyes reflecting a mix of resilience and fragility. We chatted lightly at first, exchanging small talk about work and hobbies, but as the topic turned back to the order, a silence fell over us. "It's hard to reconcile," Jamie said, fingers dancing nervously on the edge of his cup. "On one hand, I'm me, unapologetically. But on the other, I see this powerful entity trying to erase that." I felt the lump in my throat, empathy flooding my senses as I carefully searched for the right words. "You exist, you matter," I insisted, passionate yet tender, feeling every bit of the weight behind those words. His quiet smile, tinged with sadness, warmed my heart, and for a moment, it felt like we were cocooned in our shared understanding, momentarily distanced from the chaos of the world outside. As the evening wore on, we found ourselves slowly piecing together feelings we hadn't quite found the words for before. Jamie spoke about his childhood, how he had always felt out of place, struggling against a tide of societal expectations that felt like a choking grip. "Every day is like a battle," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I shared my own struggles with feeling helpless in the face of stigma, describing how I had often felt overpowered by the cacophony of voices in the world, all claiming what was real or not, blurring the lines of truth. A realization hit me: it wasn't just about this executive order, it was about every little moment people like us faced, a constant negotiation for validation in a world that seemed intent on silencing the very essence of who we are. Together, we found solace in the understanding that our narratives were still ours to share, that they could never truly be erased despite the weight of the world. As night fell and the coffee shop emptied, I noticed an overwhelming sense of relief settling in, a soft glow of unity as if we were both warriors, resilient in our truths. We spoke of activism and art, of community, of resilience, and as we laughed, I could see Jamie begin to reclaim his sense of self, his spark igniting against the darkness surrounding us. In the weeks that followed, I became more active online, amplifying voices that were often drowned out by fear and ignorance, while Jamie connected with local advocacy groups, launching a powerful dialogue within our community. One night, he sent me an article he had written about our conversation that day, detailing the resilience found in understanding and love. The comments flooded in, affirming not just his experience but the myriad of stories shared by others who felt invisible. It was liberating to see how art and conversation could combat the darkness, each supportive message shimmering like a beacon of truth. Reflecting on everything, I realized how deeply my worldview had shifted. I was still grappling with the news and its implications, but I was also steadfast in my belief that love and truth could circumvent even the most pervasive of lies. In those quiet nights typing away at the keyboard, I learned that we create our own existence through the stories we tell. Months passed, and while the executive order remained a haunting presence in the background, it faded into perspective, its power diminished by the resilience of those willing to tell their truths. I felt changed, my heart embraced a collective sense of purpose. The world had its challenges, yes, but it also contained countless stories woven together with threads of resilience and hope. As I wrote this final reflection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, not just for Jamie's friendship, but for those who had spent so long fighting to be seen. Jamie had once told me that it was okay to be tired, but it was never okay to be silenced. I hoped he would always remember that as we continued to carve spaces for authenticity in a world trying so hard to stop us. Update: just last week, Jamie texted to say he received an invitation to speak at a community event focused on advocacy and the importance of representation. I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. He was stepping into a space that bore the shadows of so much doubt yet dared to shine brightly. He was realizing the power of his voice, and in that, all our stories mattered more than the outdated proclamations of those who dared to erase us. In the end, what we lived, what we fought for, would outshine any declarations made in cold executive chambers. It would linger in conversations and bold artistic expressions that could never be silenced. As the applause from the audience enveloped him like a warm embrace, I leaned back in my folding chair, allowing the echoes of his words to dance through my mind. My heart thumped steadily in my chest, a rhythmic reminder of the joyful chaos we had created here today. I was filled not only with pride for him, my partner in this journey, but also with a deep sense of purpose. Together, we had begun to weave a fabric of community, an intricate tapestry reflecting our diverse identities and the myriad experiences that shaped us. The vibrant colors of our lives blended seamlessly, carving out a space where our truths could flourish, away from the grayscale declarations imposed by those who could not begin to understand. It was hard to ignore the tension that still simmered beneath the surface, the whispers of doubt joining the chorus of applause. After all, we were living in a world where acceptance felt like a delicate dance on a precipice. When someone had first shared the news of the executive order at the last community meeting, my stomach had twisted into knots. It felt like a denouncement, a shadow looming over the progress we fought so hard to achieve. Although I held on to the notion that words could wield a power of their own, I couldn't help but feel the sting of uncertainty. Could we retain our collective voice in the face of erasure? More importantly, what could I do to keep that spirit alive, not just for my partner, but for every individual who had ever felt the suffocating weight of invisibility? As the event wound down, I caught up with my partner, his energy still radiant despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes. "Do you think we made a difference?" he asked, his brow furrowed as he played with the hem of his shirt, a telltale sign of his nerves surfacing. I placed my hand over his, squeezing gently, letting him know that I believed wholeheartedly that we had. Our voices, our stories, were bridges to understanding, and even if just one person left with a new perspective, it was worth every moment we spent preparing for this day. We stepped outside into the cool embrace of twilight, the soft glow of string lights illuminating the path ahead. In the distance, laughter and chatter filled the air, a symphony of human connection reminding us that we were not alone in this fight. As we walked hand in hand, weaving through the throngs of community members still lingering, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. These stories, our stories, would ripple outwards, igniting sparks of empathy and mattering far beyond the limitations of political declarations. A couple of days later, I found myself scrolling through a Reddit thread titled "Ask Reddit What Are Your Thoughts on the Transgender and Non-Binary People Don't Exist Executive Order?" The comments unfurled like a rapidly blossoming flower, filled with outrage, raw emotion, and unequivocal affirmations of existence. One post caught my eye, detailing an emotion-laden story of a person who had felt incredibly alone until they discovered our community event through a mutual friend. Their words struck a chord within me, reminding me of why we pressed on: acceptance, understanding, and most importantly, the validation of one's own existence as a lived experience. This newfound drive pushed me to engage in the discussions, sharing my own reflections about the event, how every person who stepped to the microphone had shattered the misconceptions surrounding us, and how their voices were part of a greater narrative that no executive order could erase. I felt an electric connection to the thread and watched as the conversation swelled, pouring in solidarity from across the country. These digital exchanges reaffirmed a reality I clung to: people were listening, they were learning, and more importantly, they were empowered to share their truths too. A week later, at a low-key gathering of allies and friends, my partner and I shared stories and laughter over mugs of steaming tea. At one point, he turned to me, a contemplative look lighting his features. "You really think all of this matters?" he asked quietly, his vulnerability shining through the evening's cozy haze. It was one of those moments that felt raw yet comforting, where the air brimmed with possibility. "I do," I replied, the conviction thick in my voice. "Every single person we reach matters. Every story connects us. It's like our own little revolution of hearts and minds." And just as we leaned in closer, focusing on each other amid the soft hum of conversations around us, an uplifting realization washed over me. Even when shadows loom, our resolve lights the way. The world we dream of exists not just in far-off glimmers of hope, but right in that moment, between two souls, acknowledging the power in simply being, thriving, and celebrating the brilliance of life in all its forms. The executive orders, however sweeping and chilling, could never snuff out the vibrant flames of our truths. Through connection, compassion, and shared stories, we would always find a way back to the heart of our collective existence. As the night deepened and laughter echoed, I tucked away the bittersweet contours of the day, knowing that every communal embrace, every shared experience, and every step we took together transformed the narrative for ourselves, and for those who needed the strength to journey alongside us. As the night deepened and everyone mingled, I found myself standing at the fringes of the event, watching the shared joy that radiated from each small circle of friends and allies. The dynamic atmosphere was electric, a tapestry woven from countless stories, and yet, my heart felt a tug of uncertainty amid the laughter. The weight of the day's events lingered like a low fog, the chilling executive order casting a long shadow over our progress. I thought of my younger sibling, Sam, who had been bravely navigating their identity in this increasingly hostile world. They weren't here tonight, which added a pinch of sadness to my pride. I always wanted to shield them from the harshness of ignorance, yet I saw the fire in their spirit, one that refused to die out no matter the storms around them. Just last week, Sam had opened up about their struggles, the doubts gnawing at their self-worth, the troubling whispers that they sometimes couldn't silence, reminiscent of the rhetoric we had both heard echoing from the highest offices in our country. I had encouraged them to come tonight, to step out into the light among a community that would embrace them wholly. To be seen and celebrated among people who were beautifully imperfect, just like us. But in their absence, I was now reminded of how vital this gathering truly was as I watched others share their journeys with unguarded vulnerability. The air hummed with truths that often felt on the brink of being silenced by hatred. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of unity wash over me like waves lapping gently at the shore. It was soothing, yet suffocating, and I could almost hear Sam's voice in my mind, gently teasing me for being so easily swept away by the tide. Gathering my resolve, I approached a group where I recognized familiar faces, friends I hadn't seen for a while. They were deep in discussion about the implications of the recent order, but also about solutions, determined to create safe spaces, both online and offline, where everyone could feel heard and seen. Rather than jump headfirst into the conversation, I paused to listen, absorbing their determination and hope. I realized their fear was laced with a fierce commitment to change. Their voices grew stronger, noting how each of us could influence our larger community through daily acts of kindness and bravery, through the stories we crafted through our lives. It occurred to me that perhaps my role tonight wasn't merely to support Sam, but to actively participate in this movement as well. I stepped into the circle, introducing myself with a solidarity born from shared struggle. The moment felt liberating, though apprehension still fluttered in my chest. We exchanged ideas about storytelling as advocacy, about how our narratives had the power to dismantle ignorance, to build bridges where walls had tried to rise. Slowly, as the night progressed and warmth filled the air, I felt the ghost of doubt slip away, replaced by the conviction that our truths were, perhaps louder than any decree aimed at stifling them. I shared my own story, both the light and darkness, how I fought alongside Sam, but also how I learned to celebrate my own identity in the process. As I spoke, I could feel the eyes of strangers turn soft with understanding, each nod and shared expression weaving an unbreakable bond through our momentary vulnerability. In that exchange, I caught glimmers of hope, of answers, of a future that seemed a little brighter than it had just hours before, even under that oppressive cloud of uncertainty. When the event began to wind down, I rechecked my phone, reminding myself to call Sam, believing firmly that they needed to hear, if not the particulars, then the warmth and support that surrounded me now. Comfort in numbers, I thought. Together, we had the strength to push against a world that seemed intent on dismissing us. I found a quiet corner outside the venue under the luminescent glow of string lights, my thoughts clearer than they had been all day. The stars were out, beckoning, and as I dialed, I became aware that no matter how daunting the executive orders, no matter how much power they tried to claim, they could not extinguish the spark we had ignited tonight. And though our fight was far from over, the voices gathered here, the love shared amongst us, and the casual way in which we held space for one another, the collective heartbeat of our truths, were timeless and strong. Sam picked up, and the sound of their laughter spilled into the night, wrapping around my heart. You wouldn't believe it. I started, offering up the colorful tapestry of stories I had witnessed as we each became threads woven into a larger narrative. In that moment, I knew we were never alone, and our fight, our very existence, would always be more powerful than any words written in the dark. I hung up feeling buoyed by that knowledge, and as I headed back inside to rejoin the festivities, I couldn't help but smile. The journey wouldn't be easy, but it was ours to take, and together, we were undeniably strong. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but here I am, staring at my new tattoo, not sure if I'm the hero or the villain of my own story. For the last 2 years, my boyfriend, Jake, and I had been living hand in hand, going through the ups and downs of life together in our tiny one-bedroom apartment. He's the kind of guy who dreams big, and I've always loved that about him. His ambition fuels my own. We talked about engagement frequently, and while I wasn't nagging him, I was starting to feel that itch for a ring that we had sort of agreed on. So, after almost a year of saving up, I had stashed away about $1,000, earmarked specifically for a beautiful engagement ring I had seen in a local shop. The plan was to keep saving until I had enough to take him out to dinner, drop down on one knee, and ask him to be my forever. But then, life happened. Just a few weeks ago, the itch for something permanent became too strong. I had always dreamed of getting a tattoo to commemorate a moment in my life, but never found the right time or design until a sudden burst of inspiration hit me. I wanted to capture a symbol of our journey together, something that could feel like both a celebration and a mark of our commitment. So, on a whim, I walked into a tattoo parlor and dropped that $1,000 on an intricate design of a compass, where we each planned to add our initials to signify that we were each other's direction. The moment the needle hit my skin, I felt exhilarated, a rush that pushed aside any guilt I might have felt. Yet, once the high faded, the guilt settled in heavy. I started envisioning Jake's face when he'd find out, and the thought gnawed at me for days. I could see the disappointment brewing in his eyes, could imagine the way his mouth would drop open slightly in disbelief. When I finally confessed after dinner one night, it didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped. His expression went from confusion to frustration, and he snapped out of it with, "You spent our ring money? On a tattoo? Seriously?" It felt like a punch to the gut. As the words hung in the air, I tried to explain my thought process, how this felt like something I had needed for myself in that moment, but he just shook his head. "I just can't believe you chose a tattoo over the future we talked about." His tone was flat, and I felt every bit of anger and disappointment directed at me. I wanted to scream that it was more than just ink, it was a representation of everything we'd built together, but all he could see was the dollars and the broken promise. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with doubt. Part of me was excited about my tattoo, grateful for the way it reminded me of our love, but another part of me felt like I had just sabotaged the best thing I had ever had, the chance to build a life together with the person I adored. Days turned into a week, and the space between us began to feel like an echo of things left unsaid. I wanted to give him time to process, but I also felt the gnawing uncertainty. Had I ruined everything? Did I prioritize a fleeting moment over a lasting commitment? In the end, we had a long conversation a few days later, and Jake surprised me. He admitted he understood my need for self-expression and how significant it was for me, but he still felt cheated out of a moment that meant so much to him. In that moment, I promised him that I'd take on extra shifts to help us save up again for the ring. We both needed to blend our dreams together instead of letting diverging paths fracture the love we had. So, we're still together, still saving, just with a compass tattoo on my forearm and a shared resolve to navigate our way forward. Looking back, I hope I made the right choice, but I guess that's something we're both figuring out together. As I reflect on that moment, lying in bed with the weight of my decision still settling in my heart, I realize how fragile our dreams can feel. The tattoo, a simple compass, represents more than my desire for adventure and my love for the sea. It captures the essence of us, two people charting a course through life, not always aligned on every detail, but willing to navigate the waves together. The next few weeks were a mix of bittersweet emotions. I took on as many extra shifts as I could manage at the cafe, pouring coffee and exchanging pleasantries with customers while my mind often drifted back to the conversation I had with Matt, where he expressed his disappointment so genuinely. Each night, exhausted after long hours, I'd come home to find him nestled on the couch, usually with takeout containers cluttering the coffee table. His face would light up when I walked in, and I'd pretend those little moments, filled with warmth and kindness, were enough to erase the tension from before. One Saturday morning, as I served him pancakes topped with strawberries, I noticed the shadows under his eyes slowly fading. He seemed lighter, and I thought maybe the tattoo had struck a chord with him too. "You know," he said between bites, "it's not just about the ring, right? It's what it symbolizes for us." His gaze was steady, and I felt a rush of warmth realizing we were rebuilding our dreams, step by step. The conversation lingered with me, swirling in my mind through the afternoon as I painted my nails, gazing at the compass. I had adorned a symbol of our navigation, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of insecurity that nestled just beneath the surface. I started wondering if I'd ever really be able to save for that ring again. But as weeks turned into months, our shared compromise began to feel like a shared bond. We spoke about potential timelines, future plans, and the kind of life we wanted to build. None of that felt rushed, but rather infused with mutual respect. Matt confided one evening about his own dreams to travel, revealing a longing I hadn't fully seen before. "How about we save for a trip instead? Just you and me, on our own adventure," he said, an expectant grin spread across his face. There was something exhilarating about the idea, pulling us from societal expectations into a realm we could mold together. So, we changed trajectories again, setting aside the engagement ring talk for the moment, focusing instead on our travel fund. The tattoo became an anchor of sorts, reminding us to always return to our true north. It marked a chapter in our relationship, a beautiful reminder of the moment we chose communication over disappointment. Every time I glanced at it, that little compass invoked the promise of exploration, encouraging us to seek out new paths where dreams intertwined. Life moved forward like that, simple yet filled with the unexpected joys of our daily rhythms. Still, a part of me wrestled with the ghost of that elusive engagement ring, now a distant wish rather than an immediate goal. Was I selfish for prioritizing my desires over his expectations? I often questioned it, but then I'd see the look in Matt's eyes when we planned our travel itinerary, the spark of excitement that reminded me that we were figuring this out as we went. Eventually, we took our first trip together, the result of a few months of meticulous budgeting and shared late-night planning sessions that felt far more rewarding than simply swiping a card for impulse buys. As we trekked through the hills of a quaint little town filled with art and adventure, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment wash over me. We hiked to a viewpoint one evening, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, I could see in Matt's gaze something deeper than our previous expectations. "You know," he whispered, "if we ever do get engaged, it'll be because we've made this journey together." I nodded, realizing that this path felt right, even if it was not the one I initially thought I was meant to take. The uncertainty still lingered, but it felt safe nestled beside his confidence in our partnership. Now, as I sit here recounting this experience, that small compass on my forearm feels less like a marker of a choice I made on a whim and more like a testament to the beauty of navigating life together. I hope we're making all the right choices, but even if we stumble along the way, I know we'll figure it out side by side. That promise alone is worth more than any ring ever could be. I can't help but smile whenever I catch a glimpse of that compass, its lines etched in ink, a little reminder of the journey we're on. It's funny how something that started as a spontaneous decision transformed into a symbol of our bond. Through countless conversations over takeout dinners and quiet evenings on our cramped couch, it became evident that this wasn't just about the ring or the tattoo, it was about us redefining what commitment truly meant. Sure, there were moments filled with tension. I could still see the flicker of disappointment in Daniel's eyes each time I pulled up my sleeve, revealing my new ink. It wasn't reluctance he felt, it was the shadow of expectations, the weight of what he had imagined for us. But then there were also shared smiles, laughter bubbling up over iced coffee as we scrolled through engagement ring designs online. We increasingly found ourselves dreaming instead about adventures, discussing places we wanted to explore, and traditions we wanted to create. There's something about pooling dreams together that made the prospect of marriage feel closer, more tangible. I even joked that maybe we could just stamp passports with our love story instead of just fingers adorned with gold. Daniel laughed, his brows raised. It was a silly notion, but it was mine, a glimpse into my heart reaching out to him. Weeks turned into months, and while I continued to take on extra shifts, we also began mapping out our game plan. What if we saved just a little more for a trip next summer? I proposed one evening as we spread out a world map on the floor, filled with pinned locations and scribbled notes. To my delight, he spotted a little island off the coast of Thailand, and he was enthralled. We could watch the sunrise from the beach, just us and the horizon, he said, eyes sparkling, and in that moment, I saw not just a vision but a promise, a different kind of engagement. But there were still doubts that crept in like unwelcome guests. What if we never made it to that ring? What if life took us down a path that wasn't supposed to include marriage? I often found myself oscillating between exhilaration for the adventure we were shaping and fear that, in the end, it wouldn't be enough. So, I shared these misgivings with Daniel one night. Sitting by our flickering living room lamp, I admitted how I feared being seen as the one who diverted our course, the root of any uncertainty that lay ahead. What if you wanted that ring more than anything, and I've messed it all up? The vulnerability of my confession hung in the air, settling deep within us both. He took my hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "You didn't mess anything up. We're being real about what we want, and that's powerful. Sometimes it's okay to step outside the script we've been given and write our own." His words washed over me, soothing the anxiety that had coiled tightly in my chest. In many ways, that moment defined our relationship. It was about honoring each other's dreams without losing sight of our own. As time passed, that tattoo began to feel more like home to me, a compass pointing towards our aspirations, guiding us forward in harmony. Each time I felt lost or anxious, I'd glance at my forearm as if the compass were whispering that I was on the right path. And so we continued our journey, both separately chasing individual dreams and together weaving a shared tapestry of experiences we could cherish. Life was unpredictable, but we embraced it, aware that every twist and turn only deepened our connection. In the end, as our next anniversary approached, we decided to take a staycation, just an escape into each other's company without the weight of the world pressing upon us. I couldn't help but wonder what the future had in store. Would we still be dreaming of that ring next year? Would we even want it anymore? We were slowly rewriting what love and commitment meant to us, and isn't that what truly matters? I realize now that life isn't about perfect paths, it's about the journey we carve out, and I'm grateful for every bump along the road, tattooed compass and all. I still can't say for sure whether deferring the ring was the right choice, but I often see the compass as a metaphor for us, navigating together, steering clear of the shallow and unnecessary, and embracing the depth of our evolving love story. Maybe it's okay not to have all the answers right now. I trust that with Daniel by my side, every step we take will be a step worth taking, each choice reflecting who we truly are, together. I never thought I'd gain clarity from a conversation that boiled down to a simple question: am I the asshole for reminding my mom that she disappeared for 6 years? It all started on an ordinary Tuesday, just after my 22nd birthday, when I received a text from my mom, one that seemed to cascade through the silence we had established over time. "Can we talk?" The message read, punctuated with an ellipsis that left something unsaid, shrouded in tension. After everything, I wasn't sure what talking meant anymore. I'd spent too long trying to piece together the echoes of my childhood. The splintered memories of her absence were like a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. She left when I was 14, without a note, without a sign. I remember spending countless nights pacing my bedroom, wrapping the arms of my favorite stuffed animal tighter around my chest as if it could absorb the sadness creeping under my skin, desperately waiting for the front door to creak open and reveal her to me, only, it never did. When she resurfaced 6 years later, it was an awkward reunion. She was different, and so was I. She floated in and out of my life, wearing an expression that oscillated between remorse and urgency, as if she were a ghost trying to tether herself to a world she had once inhabited. We meandered through awkward lunches and tentative conversations, but the weight of what had happened still hung between us like an unspoken wound, raw and unhealed. My friends advised me to make peace with her, to forgive and forget, but the truth was, forgiveness felt like an uphill battle often punctuated by waves of resentment. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching fireflies flicker like tiny memories in the dusk, I felt a surge of boldness. The conversation had ebbed and flowed, and my mom's laughter was light, yet it triggered a memory I thought I could gloss over. "You know, it's strange," I said, almost tentatively, "that you were just gone for all those years." The moment the words spilled from my lips, everything shifted. Her laughter froze, the carefree late summer air turned thick as she turned to me, wide-eyed with surprise. I had never directly confronted her about disappearing, and maybe that was the mistake I had made all along. The evening spiraled into an emotional chasm, her defense mechanisms kicking in with a vehemence I had never witnessed before. She insisted I didn't get it, that nobody understood what she went through, her voice rising and falling like a tumultuous sea. I watched her struggle to articulate what I knew she couldn't, a deep-rooted pain that bubbled beneath her surface. But what I had said pierced through the surface tension of our fragile newfound relationship, rendering her defenses useless. I felt like I had triggered a dormant storm inside her, and while part of me anguished over this, the other fired with a stubborn insistence to be heard. "You left me," I whispered, and with that, the tremor of truth hung palpably in the air. I wasn't sure if I was asking for an apology or for her to acknowledge my pain, but it seemed to matter less than the cathartic release of finally expressing my resentment. After what felt like hours of silence, she finally spoke. "I'm so sorry," her voice fractured like glass, each word laced with the weight of regret. As we both sat in the quiet aftermath, I realized that this moment was a turning point for us, a tentative bridge that flickered with the promise of new foundations. This wasn't an easy reconciliation. I still wrestled with the anger, the abyss of loneliness stretched before me, but it became clear that she, too, was trapped in her own reservoir of regret. Our past was marred, yet the possibility of healing was glimmering at the horizon. Weeks rolled by, each conversation layered with new understanding, moments where I reminded her how difficult her absence was and the emotional scars it left, but she met me with transparency, peeling back her trauma like layers of an onion. Eventually, we crafted a bond riddled not just with apologies but with a shared willingness to confront the realities of our intertwined lives. Though the past couldn't be rewritten, it became clearer that I didn't want to dwell on it forever. Instead, I aimed to look towards what lay ahead and how we could forge a future from the ashes of our fragmented past. In an unexpected twist of fate, my initial question transformed into a catalyst for healing. I found compassion for my own pain, an awareness that understanding can twist miracles out of memories that haunt and separate. In the end, as we walked hand in hand one summer evening, I quietly realized I was not the asshole. I had simply needed to remind her of the truth to reclaim my own narrative and, perhaps, hers alongside it. As I wrap up this story, I can't help but reflect on how dramatically things can evolve. For anyone who stumbles upon this, if you've found yourself in a similar position, don't shy away from the hard truths. Sometimes the path to healing is paved with discomfort and confrontation, and that's not just okay, it can be transformative. Update: a few months later, we still have our ups and downs, but we talk regularly. We even plan family dinners now. It's a work in progress, but losing her taught me the value of open communication. Sometimes, reminding someone of their old self is precisely what you both need to move forward. As I sank into the familiar comfort of my worn-out armchair, I couldn't help but smile at how unconventional our journey had been. In the months since that pivotal moment, a conversation that unearthed years of unresolved pain, I felt like I was traversing a landscape continuously covered in fresh snow, each step unraveling new layers of understanding that had remained buried for so long. My mom and I had made significant strides, but the relationship was far from perfect. We had our fair share of awkward silences and unresolved grievances that seemed to loom over dinner tables like unsettling guests who just wouldn't leave. Yet each time we gathered, a collection of mismatched forks and plates heaped with homemade pasta or tacos, we found ourselves leaning a little more towards one another, laughter puncturing the tension that would have trapped us once. I remember one evening when we decided on Mexican, the warm kitchen filling with the spicy scents of sautéed peppers and garlic. Our conversation drifted to lighter territory. My mom made a joke about how many cooking shows I had watched. I couldn't help but tease back about her questionable interpretation of a taco. She laughed, her face lighting up as she recalled how I had always criticized her less than authentic attempts in the kitchen. The ease of it all was beautiful and yet fragile, like the last leaves of autumn trembling on the branches before winter fully set in. But amid these sporadic bursts of joy, we would still occasionally trip over the jagged stones of unresolved tension. There were days when the memories of her disappearance loomed heavily in the air, unspoken, a reminder of discomfort hanging like a fog. While we made efforts to engage in deeper conversations about the past, she often glossed over the harder parts, and I had to remind myself, sometimes in frustration, that healing doesn't always mean confronting everything at once. I learned this not just from our interactions but from conversations with friends who had similarly tangled familial relationships. Each interaction became a delicate balancing act as I tried to weigh my need for transparency against her apparent aversion to confronting certain aspects of her absence. But deep down, I felt there was a possibility, a gentle pulse of hope amid the chaos, that we could find a way through it together. One rainy afternoon, a few months into our renewed relationship, I was sifting through old family photos while dusting the shelves in my bedroom. I uncovered an image of us, taken during a camping trip when I was about 10. In the picture, we were grinning widely, her hair wild and tousled by the wind, a soft sunlight draping us with warmth. I hesitated, sensing an urge to share it with her, wanting to evoke the nostalgia we avoided, but anxiety wrestled at my throat. What if it prompted an uncomfortable conversation? What if I opened up a door that was best left closed? In the end, a quiet determination won out. I forwarded the image to her, and my heart raced as I waited for her response, uncertain of what would surface. A few moments later, my phone buzzed, a simple reply from Mom: "I remember this day. We should go camping again sometime." The words settled around me like a gentle embrace. In that small, unexpected moment, I realized how essential it was to continue fostering these connections, however tentative. Each memory shared, each laugh exchanged, and even the silent contemplations acted as glue, mending a bond that had once frayed to its breaking point. So we planned several family outings, trips to the park, impromptu movie nights, and yes, even that camping trip, which turned out to be a beautiful disaster with an overzealous raccoon raiding our snacks. Each stumble, each genuine laugh, further loosened the decades of hurt, allowing us avenues of genuine connection. Life isn't simply about resolving conflicts, I discovered, it's about embracing the raw, unfiltered moments of humanity, allowing them to reshape your understanding of each other without losing sight of where you both began. Reflecting on these experiences, I chuckled at how naive I had once been, thinking that confronting my mom about her previous disappearance would be the master key unlocking a perfect relationship. The truth was, we humans seem more like a patchwork quilt made of an array of fabric scraps, each piece significant in its imperfection, stitched together by our experiences, laughter, and the love that survived the storms. And now, as I stood amidst the remnants of our initial unresolved conflicts, I felt a quiet pride swell in my heart. We were moving forward, not flawlessly, but rather with intention and openness, and that's what mattered most. Update: It's been nearly a year since I sent that first photo. My mom finally decided to visit my place for the holidays, a huge step for us both. We tackled all the chaos together, barely burnt cookies, holiday songs we forgot the words to, and moments filled with laughter where unspoken truths only led us closer, like the final stitches in our newly knitted bond. There's still room for improvement, reflections on the past yet to unfold, but although we still have our ups and downs, I hold on to the sheer thrill of discovering that reminding someone of their worth can also truly mean reminding yourself. The holiday season that year felt almost surreal, like stepping into a storybook where you get to rewrite the characters and their fates. As my mom arrived at my apartment, the usual nervous tension that would rise in my chest was strangely absent, replaced instead by a flutter of excitement. She came with a suitcase, yes, but it was filled with more than just clothes. It was packed with a hefty dose of hope. We started off small, greeting each other with hesitant smiles that quickly warmed into embraces that longed for connection. We slid into the kitchen, a realm both familiar and foreign as we attempted to recreate our old family traditions. I remember eyeing the kitchen timer and thinking about how I had to remind her it was okay to laugh at our mistakes, instead of crying over them, like before. The cookies were hilariously imperfect, the kind that would make even the worst baking show contestants proud, yet we tried them anyway, laughing over the half-burnt edges and the slight bitterness of too much cinnamon. As we peeled away the layers of holiday chaos around us, our conversations began to unfurl like the delicate branches of a blooming tree, cautiously at first, but blooming all the same. We spoke of her absence without wading through bitterness. We spoke of my childhood without the weight of unresolved shadows. Each word felt like a brushstroke painting a clearer picture of two flawed and fragile beings who found a way back to each other. The moments were punctuated by snatches of holiday songs, our voices blending in harmony and discord, with the lyrics evading us but our spirits dancing freely. One evening, as we curled up on the couch watching old family videos, tiny glimpses into a world that felt both distant and achingly close, I caught her looking at me, a reflection of tenderness and vulnerability in her eyes. She softly admitted she regretted the years lost, yet I saw a flicker of something else, an understanding that our shared laughter and love had the power to bridge even the deepest divides. Those unspoken truths seemed to shimmer in the air between us, invisible threads weaving a tapestry of renewed trust. She expressed gratitude for my patience, which felt oddly reversed. My heart was grateful too, but for her presence, for her willingness to try anew. Each conversation, each short-lived tiff was a reminder that we were slowly threading together the fragments of our old selves with the new ones we were forging. Evenings turned into long discussions about dreams and aspirations, the soft glow of fairy lights glittering like possibilities in the air. Over dinner, we shared stories of our past and hopes for the future, anchoring our relationship in the open air of vulnerability. I felt a profound sense of comfort, her laughter filling the gaps of silence that had once felt like chasms. Sure, we weren't perfect, and perhaps we never would be, but we were learning to navigate this intricate dance of togetherness again. It was all still a work in progress, but as that holiday faded into memory, something undeniably beautiful emerged, a new rhythm that promised growth, however imperfect it might be. I realized that our bond was like those cookies we made, no longer pristine, but bursting with character, sweetness, and the warmth of shared experiences. It was deeply flawed, yet somehow, perfect in its own way. Reflecting on our journey, I understood that confronting the past was more than just a burden, it was a gift, and through those difficult conversations and tender moments, we both found a semblance of peace in the chaos. This tumultuous journey had changed us profoundly, but as I glanced at my mom, now more a friend than a figure of authority, I embraced the uncertainty of our future, knowing we were weaving a story that was all our own. I carry pumpkin seeds in my pocket and plant them everywhere I go. I've been doing this for over 20 years. It started innocently enough on a late autumn afternoon when I was wandering through my grandmother's garden, her breathy laugh dancing with the wind as she taught me how to cultivate the earth. She handed me a small handful of pumpkin seeds, each one a promise of future harvests, and said something that stuck with me: everything you plant has the power to change the world, however small. I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the seasons passed, that simple notion began to nourish my growing fascination with seeds, the cycles of life, and the hidden beauty of nurturing potential in unlikely places. Whenever I found myself in a new city or town, I would pause when I felt that familiar stirring in my heart, an urge to plant. It was never about pumpkins, really, it was about legacy, connection, and perhaps a poorly buried grief that thought I could never nurture something as beautiful as my grandmother once did. I wanted to remind the world that little things can grow into something remarkable, I wanted my grandmother's spirit to linger through those tender sprouts. As the years rolled on, I turned into something of an urban legend among my closest friends, like the mystical gardener planting life where it seemed to have none. My pocket always brimmed with tiny seeds, ready at a moment's whim. The sound of someone cursing a barren landscape would find me surreptitiously dropping a few seeds in that neglected plot of land, or softly pressing them into the dirt beside a crumbling sidewalk. I found joy in imagining the tiny plants breaking through the cement, whispering their defiance, and offering hope to strangers passing by. But a peculiar shift appeared when I stumbled upon my usual spot along a forgotten park bench one cold evening. I often took my time to plant a few seeds here, watching the way children would laugh and play nearby, and being enveloped in that comforting ambience of life unfurling around me. This time, however, I noticed a figure lingering at the edge of the trees, a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to hypnotize even the bravest of stars. I felt a twinge of unease. She didn't seem to notice the jovial laughter or the laughter of children. She merely stood, blinking slowly as if weighing the world from a distance. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached her, introducing myself with the confidence that only comes from years of believing in something. She listened, but her gaze flicked not to me, but to my hand, the hand that held the seeds tightly like a secret. "You shouldn't be planting seeds here," she said, her voice layered with an underlying imperceptible frustration. I was taken aback. Who was this stranger to question my life's mission? But there was a peculiar gravity in her voice, a sense that she understood something I did not. Despite feeling hurt, I wanted to understand her reasoning, so I asked her why not. And with an intensity that felt like a storm cloud gathering in the distance, she warned me that not all seeds are meant to take root. Some spaces are dormant for a reason, cursed perhaps by sorrow or tragedy. I was confused. Surely my grandmother's legacy couldn't disrupt the delicate balance of the world. Yet, somewhere deep in my heart, her warning lodged itself like a splinter. Days turned into weeks, and though my pocket remained heavy with unplanted seeds, I couldn't shake off that unsettling feeling. Other whispers began to creep in, mostly from friends who casually mentioned odd occurrences tied to previously nurtured patches. Flowers withered too soon, plants grew with unnatural shapes, and urban myths of a spectral gardener emerged. The story spoke of lurking shadows that appeared in gardens where I had planted my seeds, stories that echoed with memories I hoped were long buried. I wrestled with my thoughts, feeling both the ache of loyalty to my grandmother's tradition and the twinge of guilt with every seed I pocketed but never planted, battling against the storm of whether to continue or cease this ritual connecting me to her. Finally, one rainy evening, I returned to the park, carried by memories both joyful and morose, and that woman was waiting beside the bench, her expression revealing nothing but the lines of concern etched across her brow. Without a word, I drew the few remaining seeds from my pocket, palms outstretched as if surrendering to the unseeable force around us. "Plant them, but not here. Let them go into the world where they might find better ground." A sense of relief washed over me, unexpected and soft as the pouring rain embraced the earth, and I fled from that park, knowing I'd have to seek new territories, new sanctuaries to honor the promise I once made. As the years flowed, I became a traveler in search of places where every seed could thrive, planting not just for my grandmother, but for a world that might need a little extra color in its palette. Now, with every blossoming pumpkin I come across, I think of that conversation often, reflecting on how simple intentions can manifest into something beyond our understanding. Sometimes, when I return to those familiar locations, I smile at what they have become. They still bloom with exaggerated vigor, and some, surprisingly, flourish in the most unlikely terrains. Occasionally, I still feel the weight of guilt tug me toward a memory I can't quite reach, but as my fingers touch the seed packets I carry, I remember that it is okay to let some things go, to plant them in the ever-stretching possibilities of the world. I stand at the edge of each new destination, ready to find better soil, knowing that every tiny legacy I craft can yield unexpected blooms in the hearts of others. Update: recently, while wandering through a farmer's market, I encountered a woman, laughing with her children as they gathered pumpkins from a cellar. I felt a strange connection and approached her. When she turned, her eyes sparkled with familiarity, making my heart race. It was her, the woman from that fateful evening. We talked, laughed together, sharing stories of growth, both of plants and family. I realized then that perhaps planting those seeds had led me to her, creating connections that transcended space and time, and reminding me that even in the darkness of doubt, new beginnings could sprout in the most unexpected ways. As we continued to talk, I felt warmth spreading through me, not just from the sun shining overhead, but from the joy of genuine connection. Her name was Clara, and she spoke with a gentle enthusiasm that reminded me of a soft breeze rustling through autumn leaves. She told me about her garden, how it had become a sanctuary for her and her children, a place where laughter intertwined with the scent of earth and flowers. Each tale she shared reminded me of the myriad of seeds I had scattered over the years, each a tiny anchor to different moments, emotions, and places. I felt a flicker of pride. Each pumpkin seed I had planted was my silent rebellion against the void, my way of nurturing life when my own felt so unmoored. We exchanged stories about our respective lives, my heart fluttering with the thrill of the unexpected, yet this familiar feeling lingering in the corners of my mind as if Clara and I had shared a memory long lost to time. The conversations danced effortlessly, filled with warmth, as if two old friends were catching up after a lifetime apart. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with strokes of orange and purple, I couldn't help but wonder if planting those pumpkin seeds had somehow returned this lost piece of my own story back to me. Time slipped away, and when the market began to wind down, I felt an inexplicable urge to share my secret, the secret that had shaped the past 2 decades of my life. Amidst the shuffle of people packing up their fruits and vegetables, I glanced down at the small tin I kept in my pocket. It was filled with pumpkin seeds, my little carriers of hope. Taking a deep breath, I confessed to Clara about my habit of planting these seeds everywhere I visited. To my surprise, she didn't recoil or laugh. Instead, she leaned in closer, her eyes lighting up with curiosity and understanding. "You're spreading life," she remarked softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "That's beautiful." Her acceptance melted away any lingering hesitation within me, and for a moment, I felt lighter than I had in years. We parted ways under the twilight sky, exchanging numbers, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter, born from the act of sowing seeds, was destined. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to our conversations, each message a promise of laughter and connection. I shared with Clara some of the stories tied to the different places I had scattered my seeds, the old oak tree at the park where I spent hours pondering life, the abandoned lot where colors from wildflowers peeked through cracks, and the quiet beach where I had walked alone during storms of doubt. Clara listened intently, sharing her own tales, and together we discovered that with every seed, there was a story waiting to grow. One evening, as we were chatting, I mentioned how I once planted a pumpkin seed at a crossroads, a literal crossroads, when I felt lost in life. Clara paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "You know," she said, "it's funny. I used to feel so lost at that same crossroads, but I think I found myself again the day I chose to create my garden. It was then that I realized the true magic of the seeds I'd carried all these years. They were never just about planting pumpkins, they were about the connections they formed, the memories cultivated in the soil of my life, and the friendships nurtured despite the passage of time." That simple act of spreading seeds translated into hope, leading me to Clara, someone who saw the world through a lens of beauty and growth, just like I did. As our relationship blossomed into something more profound than I could have envisioned, I felt a twinge of guilt creep in. While I was overjoyed at the newfound bond, I couldn't help but worry about the weight of my secret. I feared that revealing the full extent of my obsessive planning might tarnish our connection. Yet, as clumsy as it was, I felt an inevitable pull towards honesty, towards laying bare the parts of me that had been shaped by both joy and sorrow. One evening, over a cup of tea that Clara had brewed with her children's help, I finally shared my fears, how my association with the seeds often blurred the lines between joy and grief for me. Clara listened, allowing my words to settle like dust in the soft light of her cozy kitchen, before gently assuring me that we all carry our own seeds of pain and hope. In the following months, I watched as our friendship flourished, evolving into something even more enriching than I had expected. Together, we decided to create a community garden, inviting others to share their stories and plant their seeds, be it real pumpkin seeds or the metaphorical seeds of hopes, dreams, and healing. As we tilled the soil together, laughter surrounding us like the aroma of fresh earth, I realized that those seeds I had carried in my pockets for over 2 decades had not only been about growing pumpkins but about cultivating a garden of connections and shared experiences, where life flourished in unexpected ways. The garden became a haven for the neighborhood, a place where toiling hands came together, nurturing their personal journeys while embracing the beauty of community. Now, years later, as I look around at the vibrant blooms and bustling laughter that echo in the garden, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. The seeds I planted in moments of loneliness had woven a tapestry of stories, friendships, and love, intertwining with Clara's life and so many others, reminding me that the smallest acts can have immeasurable impacts on our paths. The lesson I learned through all this is that sometimes, we must spill a few seeds into the unknown to watch as hope and connection take root, finding their way through even the darkest of soils. And just like those pumpkins, we often bloom in ways we never imagined possible. As I stood there in the vibrant glow of the farmer's market, surrounded by the warm aroma of baked goods and the laughter of children weaving through the stalls, I felt a soft breeze brush against my cheek, and for a moment, it was as if the universe was affirming the serendipitous nature of this encounter. Clara and I exchanged stories, her children, their laughter echoing alongside our words, brought life to our conversation. She told me about the pumpkin patch they had started in their backyard, a promised joy for her kids each autumn, how it mirrored her own hopes that had taken years to cultivate after her husband's passing. My heart ached with understanding. I spoke of my own journey, of the seeds I carried and planted through life's seasons, and as I recounted my 20-year ritual, Clara listened with an intensity that felt both comforting and intimate. It dawned on me that she too had known grief, yet here we were, sharing laughter and anticipation, bridging the divides of our histories as if fate had orchestrated this reunion. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays across the market, I noticed the pumpkin seeds nestled in my pocket, heavy with meaning. They had been a lifeline for me, a testament to hope during solitary nights spent wondering if I'd ever reclaim the joy I once knew. And now, standing here with Clara, it was apparent that through those seeds, I had inadvertently sown hope into others' lives too, reaching far beyond my own existence. The connection we shared felt like the intertwining roots of the very pumpkins her children gathered, binding us together in ways I was only beginning to understand. I could see her tenacious spirit reflected in the way she maneuvered through challenges, nurturing her kids while still embodying her own dreams, and it inspired a shift within me. Perhaps it wasn't merely about tending to the plants but nurturing the bonds we create with each act of kindness, each seed we scatter into the world. The afternoon faded into a soft twilight, the sky painted in delicate hues of lavender and gold, and I knew I didn't want this moment to end. So, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, I suggested we exchange numbers, confronting the idea of forming a friendship in real time, beyond the realm of chance encounters. Clara's smile bloomed brighter, lighting up her face with enthusiasm. "I'd love that," she said, a gleam in her eyes that mirrored my own beliefs about fate and connection. As we exchanged numbers, I marveled at how easily two people could find a common ground in shared heartache while also discovering the promise of companionship, like two seeds finding their place in the same garden. In the days that followed, our friendship grew in unexpected ways. Texts turned into calls, and those turned into coffee dates that flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and stories of our pasts, binding us closer. I met her kids. They were full of life, each visit to their home unveiling the world through their eyes, imagination unfettered, playfulness reigning supreme. I became a part of their little pumpkin patch, helping them nurture the plants that mirrored not only the story of their growth but also the healing process we all embarked upon together, learning one another's rhythms as shared lives often do. The more I immersed myself in Clara and her children's world, the more I realized how, through the simple act of planting seeds, I'd inadvertently transformed my lonely journey into a tapestry of relationships that enriched my heart and soul. Each pumpkin we nurtured in the garden became a symbol of our collective resilience, echoes of our laughter rustling through the leaves, reminding us of the roots we were cultivating together. I couldn't help but feel that the garden had, in many ways, become an extension of my own personal renaissance, a blossoming of hope and connection. But amidst the joy, I couldn't silence the whispers of doubt that sometimes crept back in. Could this really be it? Could I have truly found a new beginning so soon? One evening, while helping Clara and her kids carve pumpkins for Halloween, I found myself lost in thought, the glittering candlelight casting playful shadows across our faces. Clara must have sensed my distraction because she gently nudged me, her eyes piercing through my fog of insecurities. "What's on your mind?" she asked, genuinely curious. And in that moment, I poured out the remnants of my fears, my vulnerabilities tumbling forth like unwieldy seeds spilling across the ground. With earnest compassion, she reassured me, "Sometimes, we need to trust that the seeds we plant will flourish in their own time. Just as we've sowed pumpkins together, so too have we begun to nurture something beautiful between us." It was a simple, beautiful truth that struck a chord deep within me, urging me to embrace the journey ahead without the weight of expectations. Reflecting back on my 2-decade-long ritual of planting pumpkin seeds everywhere, I realized it wasn't simply about hoping for a garden to grow. It was an embodiment of faith in the power of life's smallest gestures, nurturing connections and building toward a future I couldn't yet comprehend. From that point on, every time I planted a seed in our shared garden, I felt an invitation to lay down roots, not just for the pumpkins but for the relationship budding between us, one that offered a path from solitude into community. Our lives began to intertwine seamlessly, a rhythm of support and companionship that inspired both of us to flourish. Clara and I became each other's harvest, brightening the dull moments of life with laughter and understanding. I watched, day by day, as hope sprouted and took form, nurturing not only the pumpkins in the patch but also the brave new beginnings our lives had shared. And that realization felt as miraculous as witnessing the very first green shoots pushing through the dark, rich soil of our intertwined fates. In the end, I found peace in knowing that sometimes, even the most solitary journeys lead us to unexpected gardens of connection, where laughter and love bloom amidst the shadows. The seeds we scatter throughout our lives may sprout in ways we neither foresee nor understand at first, reminding us that every act of kindness and every moment of honesty bears the potential to transform us into something we can hardly imagine. And as I look around at the thriving pumpkins each harvest season, I am left with not just gratitude but an entire garden of friendships blossoming around me, roots intertwined in ways that span the heart's vast corners, one seed, one connection at a time. I still remember the excitement I felt leading up to my 30th birthday party. It wasn't just another year, it felt like a milestone, a moment to cherish, surrounded by friends and laughter. I planned everything meticulously. The decorations were vibrant, the food was catered from my favorite local eatery, and I'd even hired a small band to play some live music. My close friends were excited, and I could hardly contain my joy. But then came the day, and everything turned upside down when Sarah, my longtime friend, the one I thought would be there by my side, arrived with her squawking 1-year-old in tow. I could hardly believe my eyes. As I wrapped my arms around her for a hug, I noticed the baby, a tiny creature with bright eyes and a loud wail, clinging to her. "Hey, I couldn't find a babysitter last minute," she said with an apologetic smile. I'd always been supportive of my friends and their parenting struggles, but there was a time and a place, this wasn't it. As the evening wore on, the baby cried incessantly, punctuating the lively music with screams that made small talk nearly impossible. I felt my heart sinking. My friends were dodging the noise, trying their best to focus on conversations, but I could see the cliques breaking apart, the laughter dwindling. It was devastating to watch something that I'd meticulously crafted slowly deteriorate into chaos. I'd waited so long for a night of celebration, and now, all I could think about was how to salvage the joy. After a while, I found Sarah alone in the kitchen, the baby resting uncharacteristically quiet in her arms. I could see it in her eyes, she was tired, and I knew the stress of this situation weighed heavily on her. But I thought about all my friends gathered in my living room, their faces strained in an effort to connect amid the wreckage of the birthday festivities. So, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Sarah," I started, my voice low and shaky, "I really appreciate you coming, but it's tough for everyone with the baby here. Do you think you could?" I trailed off, unsure how to finish. I saw thoughts racing across Sarah's face, hurt, understanding, and then a kind of acceptance tinged with sorrow. "You want me to leave?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's my birthday, and I just wanted a fun night with everyone," I replied, my heart aching. In that moment, I felt like the villain of my own story. Asking her to leave felt selfish, but staying meant sacrificing my happiness, and potentially everyone else's. With a sad smile, she nodded, understanding the difficult position I was in. "I'll go." "I'm sorry," she murmured. As I watched her gather her things and slip away into the night, I felt a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Relief washed over me, mixed with guilt that left a heavy stone sitting in my gut. I couldn't believe I'd asked a friend to leave, but the party resumed after her exit. The music felt lighter, the laughter returned, but in the quiet moments, I kept reflecting on what had just happened. Was I truly the asshole for wanting a night free of distractions? I spent days questioning my choice and wondering if I'd made the right decision. It felt wrong to sacrifice the joy of my celebration for what felt like a moment of parental struggle. Eventually, I reached out to Sarah, uncertain and nervous, but I knew I needed closure. To my surprise, she responded with grace, assuring me that I wasn't a bad friend, she understood. We talked, and she shared the exhaustion and difficulty of being a new parent, how hard it was to navigate friendships that once felt easy. As we worked through the emotions, our bond deepened, and I realized that sometimes, in friendships, things get messy, and it's okay to feel conflicted. It didn't totally erase my guilt, but knowing she understood made it a little bit lighter. That birthday became a lesson wrapped in a celebration, the importance of communication, understanding, and the love that binds us, even when situations get messy. As the night wore on, the air around us thick with balloons and the scent of cake, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since the prior awkward moments. Laughter floated through the room like a warm blanket, reminding me of the joy we had all gathered to share. My friends were unwaveringly supportive, sipping their drinks and sharing stories, and it felt like the chaotic energy from earlier had melted into something more comfortable. Everyone had rallied to lift my spirits after that initial frustration, and in that moment, I began to feel celebratory again. But it didn't just stop there. My conversation with Sarah had opened my eyes to her world. I watched as she lovingly cradled her baby, who had finally quieted down, his little head resting against her shoulder. The sight brought a new wave of understanding. I had never completely grasped the challenges she faced as a new mother, the weight of responsibility mixed with exhaustion. As we spoke deeper into the night, she shared anecdotes from those first few months, the frightening sleepless nights, the endless worries, the whirlwind of love and confusion that came with a tiny human being entirely dependent on her. I found it fascinating, the way she navigated her life now so differently than before, and while my birthday was supposed to be about me, it had quickly become a channel for both of us to process our feelings, her about the struggles of new parenthood, me about feeling selfish for wanting the party to be a carefree escape. In those moments of raw honesty, I could sense our friendship evolve. It wasn't just me and Sarah from college trying to cling to the past. We were two adults carving out a new understanding of each other, moving forward even if our paths didn't look the same anymore. We laughed, cried, and even joked about how I could have set up a designated baby zone at my party, something I wouldn't have imagined saying just a few hours earlier. It felt refreshing to let go of the guilt that had been chasing me since that afternoon. I didn't know how to balance all these conflicting feelings, but talking it out with her made it feel less like a burden. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, and my friends began to trickle out with dollops of cake in hand, I felt a soft weight settle in my chest. It was a bittersweet mix of joy and melancholy. While the party was winding down, I also realized that this night had given birth to an unexpected clarity. I wrapped my arms around Sarah, and she melted into the hug like we'd done so many times before in our carefree youth. Instead of the usual light-hearted farewells, I whispered how grateful I was for her, and she echoed the sentiment. I could see it in her eyes. She was still the same friend I'd known, just now with layers, stories, and scars that I hadn't understood before. Later that night, after everyone had trickled away, I sat alone at the remnants of my birthday party, an untouched piece of cake still glaring at me from the table. I realized how this new chapter was more than just me getting older. It was about understanding that friendships ebb and flow with the seasons of life. We might not be able to hang out like we used to or do spontaneous fun things, but what we could do was find new bonds in the changes, in the complexities. It definitely wouldn't be smooth sailing, but after tonight, I felt excited to navigate it all together, kinks and all. This birthday, marked by its chaos, had gifted me the insight that sometimes what we need most is to listen, to empathize, and to embrace the messiness. Isn't that what growing up is about? As I fell asleep that night, visions of laughter and quiet conversations danced through my mind, weaving a tapestry that felt more profound than any single celebration could encapsulate. The days following the party carried a kind of buoyant energy, a strange mix of nostalgia and hope that wrapped around me like a favorite sweater. I found myself reaching out more frequently to Mia, now not just because of obligation, but out of genuine interest in her experiences as a new mom. Our conversations began to evolve. We'd swap horror stories about sleepless nights smeared with moments of joy that made the chaos feel almost poetic. I realized I'd never fully appreciated how much love and sheer determination went into being a parent until Mia shared her day-to-day reality, painting the mundane and the profound with the same brush. It was beautiful in its honest messiness, just like the night of my birthday. One rainy Thursday, as the sky poured like it was trying to wash the world clean, Mia stopped by for coffee. The heavy scent of freshly brewed espresso filled my small apartment as we nestled into the couch, her with her favorite throw blanket draped over her shoulders, me with a comfy sweatshirt and an eagerness that buzzed in the air around us. We laughed at an embarrassing story I shared about my awkward teenage years, and I could see her eyes light up as she ventured into her own past indignities. It felt like we were reclaiming some of the uncomplicated joys we'd shared before parenthood had stepped in to complicate things. But just when I thought the moment was blissfully drifting toward nostalgia, her phone erupted into a symphony of cries and vibrations. She looked apologetic as she fumbled for the device, and in that instant, it hit me just how much her life had changed. I could see the toll it took, the way her smile faltered for just a moment, like she was being pulled back into a world of responsibilities and sleepless nights. She answered the call, and I listened softly as the familiar sounds of a cooing baby interspersed with honking cars drifted from her phone. Often, I'd tried to imagine where our friendship would go, how the kids would be a part of it, or how midnight calls would intersect with a new reality. But in that instant, seeing her navigate motherhood while holding on to our friendship, it felt like we were carving a new path together, one where complexities were acknowledged but not allowed to choke the bond we had. Post-call, Mia looked exhausted but refreshed, a paradox I was getting used to witnessing. "Sorry, it was my mom. She's picking up dinner so I can actually enjoy a night off," she explained, her voice lightening. I teased her about how she wasn't taking me out for dinner, and she laughed openly, the hearty sound pouring warmth through the room. As the evening rolled on, we settled into a comforting rhythm of conversation that breathed life back into our friendship. There was an unspoken agreement to meet somewhere in the middle where kids and adult lives could merge without erasing who we once were. Our talks shifted between dreams for the future, both personal and professional, and sometimes we would pause, reflecting on the rather surprising detour our lives had taken. Each shared moment fortified our connection, and I found myself increasingly grateful for the present, for what we were building. Nights like these became the norm. A cozy dinner here, an impromptu playdate there, each hangout reinforced the idea that friendship was about adaptability. Mia's son came to frequent our get-togethers, and he'd inevitably end up stealing the show, his giggles filling the gaps of our sometimes serious adult conversations. While there were still moments of overwhelming chaos, and I admit, there were times when I found myself longing for those carefree days without baby talk and nap schedules, I often felt a new richness in the friendship that was slowly blossoming. As time passed, those tidbits of laughter echoed in my home, changing what I thought was needed to celebrate life's milestones. I came to embrace the idea that growth doesn't come from shying away from challenges but rather from embracing them fully. Each new layer added depth to our friendship, reminding me how still water runs deep. There was a moment, weeks after the party and our newfound understanding, when I had a creeping thought of guilt rise back up. Had it all been worth it? The struggles felt real and convoluted. But on a sunny afternoon with a gentle breeze wafting through my windows, as Mia's son giggled and reached for a crayon, painting the world with bright strokes, I felt an overwhelming wash of certainty. I was so glad I'd navigated this journey with her. Friendships may bend, but they don't break, they just find new shapes, new stories to tell. As I looked at Mia, her laughter and genuine happiness spilling over, I realized I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. I never set out to ruin anyone's life, but that fateful night, as I sat in front of my laptop with the dim light flickering against the wall, the temptation loomed larger than life. I found myself staring at my English teacher's online account, the very account that had control over my academic fate. It was the end of my sophomore year, and despite my best efforts, my grades were slipping into territory I never imagined I'd face. There were various factors contributing to my decline. My father's unexpected layoff had thrown my household into chaos, and it felt as if every ounce of stability was crumbling around me. I had always been a diligent student, never once worried about failing. But the thought of ending up with a failing grade in an already difficult subject made my stomach churn. I could picture my parents' disappointment, especially my dad, who had always believed in my potential. He'd dreamed of me getting into a great college, a dream that now seemed to slip further out of reach. As the pressure mounted, I noticed that my teacher, Miss Collins, had been particularly hard on me lately, marking down my essays for minor mistakes and offering less encouragement than before. It felt personal, and after a disappointing grade on my latest paper, I thought about how futile it was to keep trying. In a moment of frustration, I recalled hearing from a friend about a simple vulnerability in our school's online system that allowed access to faculty accounts. I'd never been the type to break rules, but the idea began to seep into my thoughts, whispering promises of relief. After tossing and turning for days, the doubt turned to resolve. That evening, as I sat down to research how to disable my teacher's account, I felt an odd mixture of excitement and dread coursing through me. It was almost like a game, except the stakes were my future. The process itself was surprisingly straightforward. I kept reminding myself that this wasn't just about my laziness, it was about unfortunate circumstances. With every click, I felt my ethical boundaries shift a little further. Just this once, I whispered to myself, the words barely escaping my lips as I braced for the fallout. It took less than 10 minutes to find the right settings and disable Ms. Collins's account. The immediate rush felt exhilarating, a wildly irresponsible thrill that coursed through me, but that euphoria was quickly dampened by the weight of the decision I had just made. Days passed, and I experienced a strange sense of relief in my classes. I knew my work would go unnoticed, and I could relax without the suffocating fear of failure hanging over my head. But guilt began to gnaw at me. My classmates' confusion when Ms. Collins was absent only added to the tension. They had no idea that I was at the center of it all, the anonymous puppet master pulling strings in the shadows. Each passing day felt like a mini-eternity, the relief once felt now shrouded in shame. Driving home from school one day, I caught a glimpse of my father's hopeful face reflecting on the rearview mirror. I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing him, and the guilt continued to twist deeper into my subconscious. As I turned onto our street, an unsettling thought surfaced: what if someone found out? The implications began to feel real as I lay awake at night, replaying the moment of my decision over and over. Had I really thought this through? I felt like I was teetering on the edge of an abyss, ready to fall at any moment. And then, a call came through my phone one afternoon, a notification from the school board announcing Ms. Collins's unexpected absence due to health reasons, a shock that hit me like a punch to the gut. The mutual blame grew across the students, as they speculated on the cause of her absence. It felt like I was walking in a house of cards, and I had just blown a breath of wind that could bring the whole thing crashing down. Eventually, I chose to come clean. Sitting in front of a blank document hours later, I laid out everything: the pressure, the guilt, and most importantly, the fear of failure that had driven my reckless decision. It felt liberating, this carved-out confession, although I still trembled at what could come next. I sent it directly to Ms. Collins's school email, unsure of how she would react but hoping for understanding rather than punishment. A few days later, I received a reply that wasn't quite what I expected. Ms. Collins thanked me for my honesty, acknowledging the pressures students face and promising to support me rather than punish me. That day, I learned an invaluable lesson about integrity, resilience, and the shared burden of expectations. Feeling incredibly relieved, I stepped into my final exams with a motivation I had previously lacked. I didn't get perfect scores, but I didn't fail either. I learned that sometimes, the weight of our decisions can lead to unexpected revelations and growth. Reflecting on that period of my life, I still get chills when I think about how close I came to crossing a line I would never have been able to return from. To this day, I carry that lesson with me: honesty, integrity, and vulnerability can guide us through even the darkest decisions. Update: a few months later, Ms. Collins and I were paired at a school event, and she brought it up with a smile, acknowledging that my story had encouraged her to open conversations about mental health and pressure with her students. It felt surreal to laugh with her about it, and I understood that every choice matters, rippling across our lives in ways we sometimes can't predict. As I stood there, reminiscing about that surreal evening with Ms. Collins at the school event, a comforting warmth washed over me, stitching together the fragmented pieces of a time when my decision felt like a life or death situation. It was hard to believe that only months ago, I was a desperate teenager, standing on the precipice of failure, feeling invisible under the glaring fluorescent lights of a classroom that echoed with tension and judgment. That year had been a turbulent tide of anxiety and overwhelming expectations, where every test felt like an inescapable wave threatening to crash down on me. I remember how Ms. Collins, with her understated elegance and an ever-watchful eye, often noticed the tremors in our voices during presentations or the way we shuffled nervously in our seats during exams. But what struck me most about her was her passion for making the curriculum engaging, using humor and relatable stories to connect with her students. Somehow, this made the pressure feel even heavier. I didn't just want to meet her standards, I wanted to impress her. When I confronted that moment of vulnerability, the line between device and desperation blurred into that fateful choice. Disabling her account felt like both an act of defiance and a moment of deep betrayal. Yet, the weight of my subsequent guilt transformed into lessons I gradually started to share with my peers about honesty and transparency. After the event, our conversation meandered into deeper territories as we both reflected on how life decisions ripple outwards, subtly shaping the landscapes of our lives in ways we seldom acknowledge. Ms. Collins talked about her experiences, her own struggles with balancing expectations and reality, recounting how she had once been a high-achieving student too, feeling the suffocating pressure of attaining perfection. I listened, enraptured, realizing that behind her authoritative presence was a human being grappling with the same battles we all faced. That evening stands out in my memory more for its laughter than its tension. As we navigated the ebb and flow of our conversation, I felt an indescribable bond forming, one that transcended the boundaries of teacher and student. We were fellow travelers on this winding path of life, taking turns to share our stories, really listening to each other. Eventually, as the event wound down and we dispersed into the night, I walked away with a profound sense of closure and clarity about choices, acknowledging that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives don't define us. What truly matters is how we choose to learn from them and connect with others in the aftermath. Reflecting back now, I see how that incident influenced not just Ms. Collins but the entire class. More students began to speak up, sharing their stress and feeling validated in their struggles. It was a ripple effect, her candid acknowledgement empowering others to be open about their mental health challenges. I took pride in knowing my small act of sabotage had inadvertently sparked a larger conversation about self-worth beyond grades, transforming a potentially divisive moment into a collaborative effort to redefine success. As for me, I embraced my initial fear and shifted it into motivation, becoming an advocate within my school for discussions around mental health awareness, learning how to navigate the murky waters of failure alongside determination. I came to realize that growth isn't linear and that sometimes, we stumble into unexpected openings that allow for healing. And as time goes on, I can't help but wonder how many other stories are interwoven with ours, caught in the web of choices, redemption, and connection, forever rippling across the tapestry of our lives. It reminds me that every action, no matter how small, has its role, be it enlightening or obscure, and leaves an imprint on the heart. After all, we're all just trying to find our way, aren't we? Life continued to unfold in unpredictable ways after that fateful encounter with Ms. Collins at the school event. I found myself reflecting not only on my own journey but also on the lives of my classmates, each of us grappling with our own unique pressures. Every conversation seemed to dance with unspoken stories beneath the surface. I would watch as students shared their ambitions and anxieties, forming delicate threads connecting their aspirations, fears, and the instinctual desire to find safety in numbers. We had all learned to wear our facades, often presenting an image of confidence while battling doubts that gnawed at our insides. The pressure to excel remained heavy, cloaking our days like a fog that never fully lifted. Yet, something began to shift in me. As I grew closer to my peers, I learned snippets of their struggles. Some faced obstacles far greater than my fleeting brush with desperation. A classmate of mine, Jake, had been dealing with the ramifications of a home environment suffused with discord. Another, Sarah, was burdened by the weight of her family's expectations, contemplating medical school while harboring a passion for art. These revelations fostered a sense of camaraderie that seemed to weave us together like a vibrant tapestry. I felt compelled to create a safe space where, perhaps for a moment, we could shed our masks and be vulnerable. So, I organized a small gathering at my house one rainy Friday evening, inviting a few close friends over for a night of games and sharing, without the pressure of grades or judgment looming over us. The air was thick with laughter and the rich aroma of popcorn as we played ridiculous party games and debated who would win in a battle between superheroes. But as the night progressed, I steered the conversation to a quieter course, gently encouraging everyone to share something meaningful. Much to my surprise, the mood shifted from playful banter to genuine revelations. Secrets spilled forth like a release valve. I listened to Jake as he recounted moments of feeling trapped at home, how school felt like both a refuge and a battleground. Sarah opened up about the crushing weight of expectations, sharing her dreams of pursuing art that felt so beyond her family's understanding. As I shared my own story, the absurdity and depth of my decision to hack into Ms. Collins' account, the warmth of acceptance settled over us, binding us closer as we embraced each other's truths. That evening felt magical. It was as if we were stitching new seams into our lives, allowing ourselves to be imperfect and whole in the same breath. Days turned into weeks, and our small gatherings morphed into regular meetings, where we'd share laughter intermingled with vulnerability, creating an environment ripe for growth and support. There was something beautifully comforting in knowing that we each held space for one another. Conversations about our dreams and strategies on how to navigate the murky waters of life filled the air. Insignificant moments transformed into significant lessons, the ripples of which spread far beyond our cozy circle. The bonds we forged became an unspoken agreement. We would lift each other up through challenges, remind one another that vulnerability is strength, and dissect the chaos of high school together. By the time graduation approached, I could see the change in my friends. Their faces bore a certain glow, a confidence they hadn't possessed before. We were stepping into new chapters, but whatever uncertainties lay ahead, we now had this constellation of support that sparked the courage to tackle life's unpredictability. On the last day of school, standing outside the building one last time, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the connections we had created. As we hugged, snapped countless pictures, and made promises to stay in touch, I was hit with a profound sense of closure. I knew that the ripples of our choices had tangled beautifully, we were no longer just individuals lost in the struggles of adolescence. We were a group, connected by experiences that molded us into who we had become. In the quiet corners of my mind, I reflected on Ms. Collins and the impact of that one fateful decision. She had not only inspired me to be honest in my struggles but had also unknowingly set off a chain reaction that taught so many of us the value of openness and connection. As we prepared to step into the future, I whispered a silent thank you to the universe for the divine messiness of our intertwining lives and the lessons that inevitably came from forging connections, even in the most unexpected and challenging of circumstances. After all, we're all just navigating uncharted waters, aren't we? I never thought I would find myself in a situation that led me to question my own morals over something as simple as a dog and a few disgruntled neighbors, but life has a curious way of throwing challenges our way when we least expect them. My name is Sam, and I've lived in the same cozy house at the end of Maplewood Street for just over 5 years. It had always been a peaceful neighborhood, one where the biggest concern was whether Miss Thompson's hydrangeas would bloom in time for her garden party, rather than petty squabbles or disputes. My trusty companion, Bella, a golden retriever with an insatiable curiosity, quickly became a favorite amongst the neighbors. She possessed an innate ability to brighten the bleakest of days, her joy was infectious, and her gentle nature made her an ideal friend not just to me but to everyone around. However, a recent encounter had left me wrestling with doubt. Had I crossed a line by allowing Bella to handle things her way? One evening, after a long day at work where the creaking of office chairs and flickering fluorescent lights had drained my energy, I decided to take Bella out for her usual evening run in the backyard. The sky had started to shift into softer shades of pink and orange, and the chirping of crickets began to fill the air, creating the perfect setting for a little relaxation. As I sat on the porch, watching Bella chase her tennis ball, I noticed our neighbors, the Johnsons, arguing animatedly across the street. They had been embroiled in a feud over their new fence, which was apparently too close to the property line. I had overheard snippets of it during my outdoor mornings but chose to remain uninvolved. Those moments of rivalry never seemed to disrupt the usual tranquility of our community, until this particular night. Suddenly, Bella, intrigued by the commotion, stopped mid-chase, her ears perked up, and in a heartbeat, she dashed towards the Johnsons, barking excitedly as she approached. I could see that her spirited barks caught the attention of both the Johnsons and the other family involved in the argument. For a moment, I thought of calling her back. She could either brighten the situation or distract them further. But then another bark escaped her lips, one that projected confidence, asserting her presence as if she held the authority of a canine peacekeeper. Instead of instinctively recalling Bella, I hesitated, watching the scene unfold from the safety of my porch, wondering if she's playfully trying to referee the situation. And just like that, things took an unexpected turn. The Johnsons turned their frustrated expressions into amused ones, laughter emerging between their vehemence as they observed my dog prancing confidently around them, seemingly oblivious to their spats. They began to lower their voices, almost whispering as Bella circled them, trying to engage with each person. For a fleeting moment, it felt like an amusing break, a moment of levity that cut through the tension. However, the spell was short-lived. Bella, with a boundless enthusiasm, ran back towards me, leaping like an eager puppy, proud of her tiny intervention. I felt a rush of warmth and pride swell in my chest, perhaps she had achieved something with her playful antics. But as I turned my gaze back to the Johnsons, I noticed their expressions had mutated. Now they glared at me. "Nice dog you got there," one of them shouted, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Maybe next time, you should control her better." I could feel my heart sink, the weight of their disappointment echoing in the air. Suddenly, I felt the eyes of everyone in the neighborhood upon me, a million unspoken questions lingering in the cool evening breeze. Had I really done something worth faulting? Should I have acted differently? Inside, I started an internal debate, wondering if perhaps I was indeed the instigator of my neighborly woes. That evening, while Bella rested by my feet, I found myself scrolling through community chat groups, curiosity tugging at my conscience. Other residents had chimed in, seemingly discussing the need to reprimand Bella, a dog not only meant to protect but also to be a disruptor of harmony. I felt trapped in a moral maze, conflicting thoughts swirling in my mind. Days passed with a heavy silence between me and the Johnsons. I apologized in hushed tones whenever I encountered them, but their retorts were chilly and distant. I can't describe the unease I felt each time Bella barked, looking up at me with her bright eyes, as if asking me to send her after the neighbors once more. Eventually, my anxiety morphed into anger, not towards the Johnsons but at myself. I had wanted to keep the peace, yet now I was left feeling like a villain in my own home, culled by a series of decisions made out of impulse rather than malice. I couldn't shake off the question that lingered inside my mind: am I the asshole for not recalling my dog when she chased my neighbors off my property? In the days that followed, I grew more reflective. I realized how easy it was to get caught up in the perceptions of others, leading me to slowly let go of my guilt. Bella was innocent in all this, an unwitting participant in a human conflict that had spiraled beyond playful barks. It dawned on me that I wasn't just protecting her by allowing her to chase off the Johnsons, I was allowing her to be herself, vibrant and carefree. As the summer skies grew darker, I made a decision: I would invite the Johnsons over for a barbecue, an opportunity to mend the rift that had caused an unwelcoming chill in our neighborhood. Stepping outside, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me, but I steadied my breath and carried on. The smell of grilled burgers began to fill the air, and as the Johnsons tentatively approached our doorstep with initial reservations, all that slowly began to shift. The encounter ended with laughter, Bella stealing the spotlight as she playfully wooed every guest for scraps. Finally, as the sun set, painting the sky with hues of lavender and indigo, we gathered around the fire pit, quietly acknowledging that conflict is part of living in close proximity. Reflecting on that night under the stars, I found a sense of peace, an understanding that while we may err in our judgment, it's how we come together afterward that truly matters. My heart swelled with relief as I realized that I hadn't harmed my neighbors. Instead, I had enabled a chance for connections to deepen. And as for Bella? She's still a free spirit, and I wouldn't want her any other way. Update: a week after the barbecue, I received a message from the Johnsons over the neighborhood chat group, thanking me for an enjoyable evening. They recognized their own part in the initial escalation and shared stories of their own pets that offered a glimpse into their world. It turns out, all it took was a little ceremony of shared laughter and the promise of goodwill to wipe the slate clean and embark on a more harmonious chapter for Maplewood Street. My heart swells with hope and understanding that sometimes, all it takes is a playful dog to remind us of the bonds that can uplift our community. As I sat on my porch that evening, the sun dipping low beyond the horizon and casting golden hues over Maplewood Street, I reflected on how transformative the past few days had been. Bella, my spirited golden retriever, lay by my feet, her gentle breathing a soothing rhythm against the chirping of crickets that began to fill the air. Each time I glanced down at her soft, golden fur, I felt a swell of gratitude, not just for her loyal companionship, but for the unexpected bridge she had built between my neighbors and me. The Johnsons, with their youthful laughter and easygoing nature, had become a source of warmth in my life that I hadn't anticipated. When I first moved to this suburb, I was hopeful yet slightly reticent about engaging with my neighbors. After living in a busy city for years, where the sounds of traffic drowned out the feeble attempts at community greetings, I was unaccustomed to the warmth that now blossomed around me. Having lived the last few years in solitude, the hum of community life felt both refreshing and intimidating. At the beginning of my stay in Maplewood, I remained an observer, smiling at neighbors from a distance, offering polite waves but never venturing further. But Bella's exuberance had a knack for cutting through my apprehension. She would trot up to anyone with uncontainable excitement, her tail wagging furiously, urging me to engage. It was through her antics that I began to learn the names of the folks who lived nearby and shared snippets of their lives. That fateful day when Bella decided to chase off those obnoxious trespassers had initially left me feeling anxious, fearing the potential backlash and the strain on our freshly budding relationships. Yet, the message from the Johnsons had shifted everything. The evening had unfolded so beautifully, a mosaic of laughter and stories unveiling our shared experiences. The gentle banter about our pets broke down walls that I had previously thought were impenetrable. It marked the day my neighbors invited me into their circle, emphasizing that we were all human, susceptible to misunderstandings and hesitant connections. As twilight settled in, I thought about how far I had come, and in a subtle way, it dawned on me that life in Maplewood had started to feel like home. With each shared moment over the preceding weekend, the lines between neighbors faded, replaced by the understanding that we were all just trying to navigate this chaotic, beautiful tapestry called life. I smiled to myself, recalling how Bella had innocently prompted our little gathering, a series of unforeseen events all triggered by her instinct to protect, a fierce loyalty accompanied by boundless joy, the very essence of what made dogs so remarkable. Curiously, as the last light of day melted away, I found myself drafting a message in my mind to post later in the neighborhood chat. Something simple yet heartfelt. Perhaps I would propose a summer barbecue, nothing fancy, just some burgers and laughter, a casual gathering where we could continue to weave our lives together. My fingers itched to get the words down, eager to strike while the iron was hot and maintain the warmth that had ignited between us. Yes, I thought, this includes all of the neighbors, everyone from the retirees down the street to the young families who had recently moved in. They all deserved a chance to feel that sense of camaraderie that had begun to envelop Maplewood Street, all sparked by a dog's undeniable spirit. As I rose to prepare a late dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that a new chapter was unfolding for our little corner of the world. The lesson I had gleaned over the last few days was profound. It's extraordinary how a bit of laughter, understanding, and goodwill could shape lives and communities peacefully. I knew within me that this was only the beginning, a gentle nudge towards deeper connections and lasting friendships, all thanks to the loud bark of my beloved dog who believed that every heart could be won over with a wagging tail and a little unfiltered enthusiasm. And as I stepped inside, Bella stood up in a stretch, nuzzling against my leg as if to say, "Let's get to work on building that community, Mom." The ceaseless love we give and receive simply overlaps so effortlessly. In that moment, I felt ready for whatever adventures lay ahead, knowing Bella and I would tackle them together. With Bella's warm presence grounding me, I felt an undeniable shift in the air, one that flowed through the walls of our home and into the very fabric of Maplewood Street. It was invigorating to think that we could play a role in transforming our neighborhood, where once there was tension, there could now be laughter, forgiveness, and camaraderie. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. I pondered how to harness this newfound energy. With the holiday season approaching, a neighborhood block party began to form in my mind, a chance to weave everyone together, even more so than that initial gathering at my house. I quickly created a shared document and dropped it into the neighborhood chat. To my delight, responses flooded in with ideas for food, games, and festive decorations. The more the Johnsons and their 2 kids offered up their favorite recipes, the more others contributed their own delicious dishes. It felt like we were collectively crafting a feast that would tell the story of Maplewood Street, encompassing all of our backgrounds and cultures, with Bella's joyful spirit leading the way. As preparations progressed, Bella became my little assistant. She accompanied me on trips to the local farmers market, where we picked up fresh fruits and vegetables, sniffing around stalls and earning a few head pats from smiling vendors. Each delivery and every shopping trip felt like a micro-venture, her excitement infectious as onlookers marveled at the boundless energy radiating from my ever-enthusiastic companion. Our conversations at home shifted too. No longer were the evenings filled with dull chatter about mundane tasks. Instead, we reveled in brainstorming creative ideas for the party decorations, mixing ideas of string lights with a DIY photo booth featuring props inspired by the quirky personalities of our neighbors. It was a charming banter with Bella by my side, her tail thumping against the floor as if she were adding her own approval to each suggestion. Then came the big day of the block party. Warm sunlight spilled across the street as laughter and hustle filled the once empty spaces. Everyone had pitched in, and our front yard stood transformed into a gathering place adorned with twinkling lights and vibrant banners. Bella darted through the clusters of people, eager to greet everyone, her playful spirit breaking the ice as children giggled and adults shared stories over plates filled with food. It felt as if we had unearthed hidden gems in our neighbors. The taciturn Mr. Harris revealed himself to be a fantastic storyteller, regaling us with tales of his youth, while Mrs. Jenkins brought out an incredible chocolate cake that seemed to disappear within minutes. Throughout that magical afternoon, I found myself reflecting on how just a month ago, stress and uncertainty hung over our neighborhood like a dark cloud, and now, the air was thick with camaraderie and connection. Bella would chase after the kids, barking delightedly as they tossed a frisbee, her playful barks mixing harmoniously with their laughter. Occasionally, one of the little ones would tumble into one of the neighboring groups, and the adults would rush to comfort them, smiles on their faces still. I realized Bella was weaving her charm, encouraging openness, kindness, and unguarded laughter among us all. As dusk approached, an impromptu circle formed around a fire pit, illuminated by the soft glow of lanterns hanging from above. The warmth of the flames complemented the connectedness that blossomed around me, forging bonds between families and thoughts of future gatherings already swirling in the air. By the time the last glow of the sun dipped behind the horizon, I caught sight of Bella nestled comfortably in my lap as we wrapped up the evening, her breath deep in content. A gentle peace enveloped me. It dawned on me that community is born from simple gestures. It is about being present for each other and willingly sharing our lives. Who would have thought that one chaotic chase, followed by a knock on all our hearts, would lead us here? With every heartfelt joke exchanged and every food sample shared, I felt the barriers that had once distanced us crumble away to reveal a welcoming embrace of unity. Perhaps Bella was right all along. with a wagging tail and a heart open to connection. Even the most fragmented of communities can truly come together. As I tucked Bella in for the night and settled onto the couch, I opened my phone only to find another message from the neighborhood group, this one a suggestion for a weekly potluck. Reading their words made my heart swell again. With the promise of next week already on the horizon, I realized Bella had sparked not just a party, but a movement, a shift in the hearts of those around us. As I drifted off to sleep, wrapped in the warmth of that community spirit, I felt an unwavering optimism for the future take root within me, certain that together with Bella, we would navigate whatever adventures awaited us. There's a weight that lingers on my chest, a secret I've carried for far too long, and it all began on that warm summer day when we were kids, bouncing on the old trampoline in my backyard, laughter echoing like music in the air. My childhood friend, Mark, was more than just a companion, he was my partner in crime, the brother I never had, always up for an adventure, even if that often involved the kinds of mischief that led to scoldings from our parents. As we grew up, that bond only deepened, forged in deep conversations, shared dreams, and endless inside jokes. But life has a strange way of pulling people apart. College took Mark to a city far away, and while we stayed in touch, the distance began to change the nature of our relationship. Then came the day I had always longed for, the birth of my son, Ethan. In that moment, a fire ignited in me, an overwhelming urge to pay tribute to the person who had been a cornerstone in my childhood. After much contemplation, I decided to name my son after him, Ethan Mark, a name I believed would honor that friendship. It felt right, a quiet bond woven into the fabric of my being, yet as the months passed, a dread began to swell in the pit of my stomach. Mark had no idea. To him, I simply had a son, and I had neglected to share the truth behind his name, a truth so laced with love and affection that it became suffocating. Every text, every call, felt like a tightrope walk, and I found myself instinctively avoiding any conversation that could lead to the revelation. The guilt gnawed at me, almost as if naming my son after him was a betrayal by keeping it from him, a part of our shared history that I denied. The thought echoed in my mind, and with each passing day, I imagined how Mark would feel upon discovering the truth. Would he be honored, or would he think I was withholding that love? The indecision ate at me mercilessly. One evening, after tucking Ethan into bed, I found myself scrolling through our old photos on my phone, pictures of us laughing, getting muddy in our youth, clutching our ice cream cones like trophies. There it was, a haunting nostalgia that held both beauty and pain, and in that moment, I wondered if I had tarnished that bond I cherished so much. As days turned to weeks, I could feel the pressure build until it snapped one Sunday afternoon while Mark was visiting, sitting on my couch, laughing over tales from our school days as Ethan played in the background, blissfully unaware. When the laughter faded, I felt compelled to confess everything, to claim my vulnerability. "Mark, there is something I need to tell you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked apprehensive, those familiar brown eyes squinting with curiosity. I took a deep breath and shared my truth, the name, the reasons behind it, and the selfish fear that held me back. Silence enveloped the room. Time felt heavy as it ticked away, and for a moment, I thought I had ruined everything. Then Mark's smile slowly returned. And tears welled in his eyes as he took my hand. "You've carried this for so long, haven't you? It means the world to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Relief washed over me in waves, replacing the burden that was once there. In the aftermath of that revelation, we shared stories about what it meant to grow up together and how we would guide our sons into that same reckless joy we had known. I realized that sometimes, the scariest secrets can lead to the biggest breakthroughs, and as Mark hugged Ethan tightly, my heart swelled with comfort, knowing I had shared a piece of our history that would only serve to deepen our bond as friends. As I reflect on that day now, I can say it was a turning point, and while I may have delayed confronting my truth, the love I had for Mark and the silent understanding between us had transcended fear and hesitation. Update: it's been a few months since that day, and I can honestly say that my relationship with Mark has grown even stronger. He has embraced Ethan like a second son, creating new memories that are steeped in love and laughter. We have started a tradition of adventure weekends, where we take our sons to the places we used to explore, and each new adventure is, in its own way, an homage to our past friendship. I've learned that holding on to fear only creates distance, while sharing truth and vulnerability can build bridges. The best part? The other day, I overheard Mark telling Ethan about how special his name is, a legacy that they both now share, something I never realized would bring us even closer. Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? Mark and I had found ourselves laughing over memories from our childhood, as we set up camp at the river where we used to fish under the setting sun. The sound of crickets filled the air, weaving an invisible tapestry of nostalgia around us. My heart swelled at the sight of our sons playing nearby, their laughter mingling seamlessly with the sounds of nature. They climbed trees as we had once done, completely lost in their own world of adventure. I couldn't help but marvel at the bond forming not just between our children but between Mark and me as well. Every story I shared with him was tinged with the bright hues of reminiscence, each tale deeper than the last, revealing pieces of my heart I had kept tucked away out of fear. The truth about Ethan's name still lingered in the air, a sweet secret that felt like a warm hug every time I caught a glimpse of Mark's easy smile. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, I took a moment to reflect on the path that had led me here, the countless moments that could have gone differently if fear had held the reins. It wasn't merely a river running alongside our camp, it felt symbolic of the bonds being forged right in front of me, flowing with potential and history all at once. So many years had passed since that fateful moment in high school, the day I knew my best friend was facing more hardships than I could understand, yet I had chosen to remain silent about the pain I felt, the loss of the friendship we once had. But tonight, with the gentle hum of nature all around, I sensed that I was ready to let go of my hesitation. I would tell him the truth about naming Ethan after him, that in the quiet moments of my son's life, I found pieces of Mark's spirit reflected back at me. It was more than just a name, it was a bridge spanning 2 generations, a reminder that love can withstand time, hurt, and misunderstandings. With the night wrapping around us like a cozy blanket, I took a deep breath, the cool night air filling my lungs, and resolved to reveal the heartfelt significance behind Ethan's name before the weekend was over. As I glanced over at Mark, my heart warmed with confidence. I was no longer afraid. That evening, as we sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows under the vast expanse of twinkling stars, I knew the sound of our children's laughter was just the beginning of a new legacy, one built on honesty and acceptance. The stillness surrounding us felt embraced by clarity, the very atmosphere nudged me forward. I marked the moment, relishing the flickering flames, the laughter, and the connection, reminding myself that what could be gained from this truth was far greater than any fear I had harbored. As I prepared to share that piece of my heart, something monumental shifted within me, the realization that having friendships rooted in vulnerability might be one of the truest forms of strength we could carry into the future. With my heart racing but my resolve firm, I waited for the right moment during our adventure weekend, a cozy bonfire under a star-studded sky. Mark was flipping burgers on the grill, the scent merging with the crisp evening air, when I saw the light of curiosity glinting in his eyes. I could feel the warmth of the fire reflecting the warmth of the moment, and it occurred to me that this was the perfect time to tell him. Our sons were wrapped in their own world, gabbing excitedly about their favorite stories and superheroes. I could hear Ethan's contagious laughter, and it pulled my attention back, reminding me of how quickly time had slipped by since Mark and I were kids ourselves, giggling over silly games and hidden treasures in the woods. I took a deep breath, gathering courage stirring within me, and I called Mark over, inviting him to join me at the edge of our gathering. He approached, holding 2 plates piled high with burgers and s'mores, a proud smile lighting his face. Ever feel like the past has a funny way of sticking around? I began, surprised at how easily the words flowed, even with the weight they carried. Mark raised an eyebrow, setting the plates down on the low wooden table as he leaned in closer, genuinely intrigued. "What's stirring in that head of yours?" I chuckled lightly, thankful that laughter had helped to diffuse the air. "It's just. You remember those days we would dream about our futures? Sitting on that rickety old swing set?" Mark's smile widened as nostalgia danced through his eyes, the flickers of the flames reflecting the warmth of those shared memories. "How could I forget? We had it all figured out back then." "Yeah, and we thought we'd name our future kids after each other, right?" The jest hung in the air for a moment, a playful acknowledgement of our childhood innocence, but I wasn't quite ready to lead with humor. "Actually, Mark, I need to tell you something." He tilted his head, curiosity morphing into something deeper, more sincere. "What is it?" "The truth is, I named my son Ethan after you." Saying it out loud felt like exhaling after holding my breath for too long, the words hovering between us, heavy with years of unspoken sentiment. "I wanted to honor that friendship we had, and you have meant so much to me," I admitted, scanning his face for reaction, watching as a mixture of surprise and admiration flickered across it. His gaze softened and then crinkled at the edges, his smile radiating warmth. "Really? That's amazing, I had no idea," he said, seemingly touched. It was as if a secret barrier had shattered between us, bringing forth an unspoken bond that hadn't faded, merely waited for the right moment to reveal itself. My heart swelled, relief coursing through me. We spent a moment in silence, the night wrapping us in its comforting embrace as crickets chirped a soft symphony. I always felt this connection, Mark continued, and there was resonance in his voice that made me feel seen, understood. It was cathartic. To think we'd name our sons after each other, what a legacy, right? In that moment, it felt as if a tapestry of our lives had woven together in the most beautiful way. The laughter of our sons burst through our revelatory bubble, pulling us back into joyful reality, but I felt lighter, unburdened by secrets. The conversation flowed easily after that, as we shared what being fathers had taught us, how our relationships had evolved, and what it meant, beyond mere naming, to keep the spirit of our childhood dreams alive. As the night wore on and the fire dwindled, I realized that our friendship had transformed not just from nostalgia but from honesty and vulnerability, those seemingly simple acts now the very foundation of something enduring, something that would guide our children in their future adventures. As I exchanged stories with Mark, laughing at old memories, I understood that life doesn't always unfold in the straightforward paths we envision. Sometimes it dances around corners filled with uncertainty only to reveal deeper connections than we had dared to believe possible. When the evening finally came to a close, the embers warming our goodbyes, I held on to the moment, knowing that this is what sharing life truly meant. I went home that night feeling grateful, armed with a renewed understanding of friendship and family, and pondering how this legacy of authenticity would ripple through the years ahead. With Ethan asleep in his bed, and dreams whispering promises of adventure, I realized that the future was a blank canvas, and with every moment I shared, I could paint it with love and truth. And at the end of the day, isn't that the greatest adventure of all? Confession, I am so desperate to be seen naked, so I go to saunas. It feels strange to admit this, but it's the truth that's been burrowing itself deeper into my mind with each passing day. I grew up feeling invisible, always blending into the wallpaper of my life, and as I moved into adulthood, that sense of anonymity settled uncomfortably within me. I work in a corporate office where everyone wears the same bland suits, and despite my attempts to connect with my coworkers, I often feel like a ghost, drifting through the hallways unnoticed. The idea of being seen, truly seen, without the barrier of clothing, began as a whisper in the back of my mind during one of those long, disheartening days at work. After overhearing a few colleagues share stories about their trips to a local sauna, where they'd experienced an exhilarating sense of liberation, I decided to find a place and give it a try myself. The first time I stepped into the sauna, my heart was racing, not just from the heat enveloping me like a warm blanket, but from the thrill of stepping outside my comfort zone. I had chosen the hour when it's typically quieter, just me and the relief of the steam filling the space, the sound of water softly bubbling in the corner. I cautiously peeled off my towel, each moment feeling like a revelation, as I sat there, the heat seeping into my skin, electrifying my senses. With my eyes closed, I could almost believe I was invisible, like a part of the soothing steam that wrapped around me. The first few visits were largely uneventful, just contemplative time alone in a shared space, but it soon became clear to me that there was tension brewing underneath my seemingly innocent nudity. I realized that what I truly craved was not just the warmth of the sauna but the comfort of being openly vulnerable, stripped of societal expectations and judgments. I watched individuals come and go, their conversations floating around me, laughter spilling over easily, creating an inviting atmosphere that I had never felt before in my corporate life. Then came the turning point, an unexpected encounter with a woman named Elena. She entered one day, radiating confidence and ease, and immediately captured my attention without saying a word. She settled across from me, the soft light reflected in the steam floating around us, and as I caught her gaze, I felt the gravity of my own vulnerability. I longed for her approval, her attention, thinking that perhaps this was what I had been seeking all along. Affirmation in the starkness of our nakedness. We shared some small talk, the pleasantries of strangers slowly blossoming into something more intimate over the weeks. With each conversation, I found myself more drawn to her, but also more terrified of the vulnerability I was exposing. My thoughts spiraled, wondering if she saw me as I wished to be seen or simply another body in the steam. The emotional swell of confusion and desire became exhausting. I enjoyed our chats deeply, yet held the shame of my intentions just under the surface, pondering if I was chasing this connection or merely hiding behind my longing for attention. As the weeks rolled on, I noticed that every visit became a mix of dread and excitement. My chest would tighten as I approached the sauna entrance, the prospect of encountering Elena twisting my insides like the steam swirling around me. On one particularly humid afternoon, I took my place beside her, the air charged with unsaid words and unacknowledged feelings, our bodies so close yet worlds apart. There was a fragility in the air, and it struck me then, how desperately I craved to leave my mark on this life, to be more than a nameless figure fading into the background. That day, amidst the soft drumming of my heart and the subtle scent of eucalyptus enveloping us, I confessed to Elena my struggles with invisibility, the anxiety of being overlooked in life, and, most fearfully, my unacknowledged desperation for validation. I spoke with a rawness I hadn't anticipated, spilling my truths like the sweat beading on my skin. To my surprise, Elena didn't recoil. Instead, she shared her own experiences, admitting that she, too, had felt the loneliness of being misunderstood and the joy found in being seen, not only by others but by herself. We talked for hours, our walls melting away along with the sauna's heat, unveiling not just our vulnerability but a meaningful connection that provided solace and strength. In retrospect, I realized that it was never about the nakedness or the sauna itself. It was about the courage to be seen, truly seen, and for once in my life, I felt a spark of clarity. I found freedom in vulnerability, and the comforting notion that seeking connection, while fraught with uncertainty, can yield the most extraordinary transformations. In the days that followed, my visits became less about mere exposure and more about self-acceptance and the burgeoning friendship I had with Elena. No longer was I the desperate individual solely yearning for attention, rather, I embraced my intersectionality of longing and companionship. We continued to meet, spending lazy afternoons wrapped in the comfort of our thoughts, but now, it infused with laughter and a shared understanding. The sauna, once a symbol of my vulnerabilities, had transformed into a sacred space of connection and healing. Update: a few months have passed since those revealing confessions in that steamy sanctuary, and I'm happy to report that Elena and I have grown much closer. We even explored the possibility of a romantic relationship, stepping into a world where intimacy flourishes and being seen as an everyday luxury rather than a rare obligation. I'm still learning to embrace my nakedness, not only in the physical sense but emotionally as well, and I find solace knowing that opening myself up to someone else has yielded greater rewards than I initially sought. The sauna has become our special haven, gradually shifting from a symbol of desperation to one of hope and companionship. It remains a vibrant reminder that the quest to be seen can lead to beautiful connections and unexpected transformations. Looking back over the last few months, I realize how far I've come, how those tense moments spent alone in the sauna have morphed into shared laughter and gentle conversations that flow like the steam that envelops us. Marcus, my newfound companion in this intimate journey, has changed the way I perceive not only my own nakedness but also the vulnerability that comes with allowing someone else into those raw spaces of my life. When we first met, it was just me, sitting quietly, wrapped in the warmth of the cedar walls, eyes closed, my mind wandering to all the causes of my insecurities, the memories of feeling invisible in crowds, of being a spectator in my own life. Then came the day he slid open the heavy door, steam curling into the air like whispers of hidden secrets, and settled down beside me. His presence was unexpected, yet there was a calming assurance in the way he carried himself. We exchanged a few pleasantries, both wrapped in our towels, sharing shy smiles, but there was an undercurrent of drawn tension, the kind that happens when you sense that your life is about to shift in an undeniable way. With each visit, we found ourselves gravitating closer to one another, our separate journeys of discovery weaving a tapestry of shared experiences that grew richer with every passing hour. As the weeks passed, our conversations developed from nervous giggles and banalities into deeper discussions about life, dreams, and fears. I learned that Marcus, too, had been seeking liberation, that he had spent years suffocated by the expectations of others, the weight of carefully constructed facades. Our private sanctuary became a place where the disrobing of clothes was merely the beginning. It was in shedding our emotional armor, the layers of pretense, that we truly began to flourish. In the gentle heat of the sauna, we learned to respect each other's boundaries, to explore the outlines of our souls without rushing into intimacy, allowing the space for trust to develop at its own pace. Once, after a particularly profound conversation, when I spoke about my childhood struggles, Marcus took my hand in his and squeezed it gently, a simple gesture that conveyed understanding more profoundly than words ever could. In those moments, I realized that the desperation I once felt to be seen merely stripped away layers of armor. What I truly craved was connection, understanding, and love in its purest forms. It was during a twilight evening at the sauna, the world outside fading into a whisper of cool air contrasted against the steamy warmth inside, that everything shifted. Surrounded by the musky scent of eucalyptus and soft flickering light, we made a pact, not just for the two of us but also to continue this newfound exploration with others. The brave act of being naked in front of one. Another became a metaphor for the kind of vulnerability and openness we wanted to cultivate not only in our growing affection but in our interactions with the outside world. Inspired by the freedom we found together, we began inviting others to join us in these discussions, people from our lives who struggled with their own insecurities or simply desired a safe space to explore their personal journeys. Little by little, our sauna transformed from a place of self-sought desperation into a community of sincerity, growth, and acceptance. As we gathered more often, the sound of laughter, shared stories, and the comfort of bare skin against warm wood turned our sanctuary into a fragrant blend of healing and camaraderie. It was intoxicating, watching as people uncovered themselves, both in body and spirit, fighting the urge to conform to societal standards. And within this newly formed tribe, I felt strength swell within me. Each person who walked through the door reinforced my belief that every struggle to be seen, to be understood, was an essential step on the path toward authentic relationships. It felt as if we were reclaiming the narrative of our lives together, each of us no longer afraid to emerge from the shadows into the light of acceptance. And so, as I sit here, reflecting on the journey from volunteering to be vulnerable to creating a safe harbor for others, I've come to realize that sometimes desperation leads us to unexpected places. The quest to be seen has morphed into a brighter vision of companionship, insight, and the realization that we are not meant to navigate these experiences alone. Each of us, stripped bare of judgment and fear, finds that true connection happens not in the obscured corners of our lives but in the shared spaces where our souls can breathe freely. Update: after the last sauna gathering, I've become more adventurous. We decided to organize a weekend retreat dedicated to embracing ourselves wholly, physically and emotionally. I never expected my search for visibility to blossom into this beautiful community. Marcus and I are exploring the next steps of our relationship, and I can genuinely say that I am learning to lift the veil of self-doubt not through sheer will, but through the love and support that surrounds me. Whether we pull it off or not remains to be seen, but if the sauna has taught me anything, it's the power of opening up, letting go, and letting the warmth of camaraderie wrap around you like a cozy embrace. As I stepped into the sauna that evening, a familiar warmth enveloped me, bringing with it an intoxicating mix of steam and laughter. It was a bustling Friday night, which meant the atmosphere was alive with friendly chatter and the soft sounds of splashes from a nearby hot tub. The scent of eucalyptus wafted through the air, mingling with the hint of soft skin meeting wooden benches, making it feel sacred, almost like a sanctuary. I glanced over at Marcus as he entered, his bright smile instantly lifting my spirits. We've come to cherish our time here, not merely as a shared space but as a canvas for our blossoming relationship, one filled with light-hearted conversations and moments of silence that spoke volumes. I was beginning to realize that my craving for being seen wasn't solely about the physical act of bearing myself, it was a deeper yearning for connection, a desire to let people into the raw honesty of who I was beneath those layers of skin and self-perception. As we settled onto the wide bench, I found myself reflecting on a recent conversation. Just the week prior, Amy, one of our more outspoken sauna friends, had playfully nudged me to consider how nakedness could serve as a metaphor for vulnerability, not just the absence of clothes but the shedding of emotional armor. When we strip away our insecurities and let ourselves be authentic, she said, her words dripping with warmth like the condensation on the windows, that's when we truly connect. I felt the gentle stirring of something profound within me as I came to terms with how much I held back for fear of judgment and rejection. I looked at Marcus, seeing the way he spoke with his hands, how his laughter invited me to lose myself in the moment, and I realized he didn't just see my naked body, he appreciated the layers beneath my skin, the quirks and vulnerabilities that made me who I was. As our conversations meandered that night, jumping from the silliness of everyday mishaps to deeper discussions about our childhood dreams, I found myself suspended in a state of blissful existence, fully engaged and present. I had never felt more seen or valued. The sauna, once a space I frequented out of desperation, evolved into a cherished place where affection and honesty flourished, entirely transforming my initial yearning into something profoundly beautiful. Eventually, as the water swirled softly around us, I took a leap into the depths of my thoughts without hesitation. You know, Marcus, I began, my voice a touch steadier than I anticipated, it's funny how this all started as a quest to be seen in a physical sense, but now, it feels like it's grown so much more. He nodded, eyes sparkling in the dappled light, and urged me to continue with a gentle smile, his presence radiating reassurance. I spoke of my evolving relationship with vulnerability, about how I was slowly dismantling the walls I erected around my heart and mind. I think I'm finally beginning to understand what it means to be comfortable in my own skin, not just physically, but emotionally too. The softening of his gaze communicated an understanding far deeper than words could convey. In that cocoon of warmth and acceptance, I felt a piece of my heart unlock, allowing all that I had grappled with to flow freely like the steam around us. Our laughter melded with the soft patter of the water, and under the weight of those shared moments, I began to acknowledge my fears of inadequacy. It felt liberating to confess my doubts, to speak them into existence rather than bottle them up. As the session waned, dipping into the cooler air felt almost shocking, and yet exhilarating. A shared promise hung between us, unsaid yet deeply felt, that we would continue to explore this newfound connection. In that moment, I realized that being seen had transformed from a desperate craving into a warm badge of courage. The sauna had taught me to embrace not just the warmth of physical presence but the raw, tender exposure of the spirit beneath, open, honest, and, above all, human. As we exited, laughter trailing behind us, I understood that true connection thrives not just in being seen, but in being trusted, loved, and cherished for the entirety of who we are. Months have passed since that first fateful leap into a realm of vulnerability, and now, as I reflect on my journey, I feel a sense of profound gratitude wash over me like that soothing sauna steam. Marcus and I have grown closer, delighting in every moment, be it within the warm embrace of the sauna or in our everyday lives, embracing our naked truths together. For those yearning to be seen, I've learned that the warmth of companionship is not found in the act of exposing one's body, but in revealing the colorful tapestry of our souls. Not long ago, I had approached the sauna searching for visibility, yet I now find myself standing on the precipice of belonging, hopeful of the future and eager for each moment yet to come. And with that thought, I know I'm ready to face whatever lies ahead, no longer just desperate to be seen, but content in the love and acceptance that dwells not just in places warm with steam, but in the deep recesses of my heart where understanding intertwines with connection, ready to embrace life in all its beautiful, naked moments. It's funny how life can seem so normal one minute and then unravel completely the next. I remember sitting in my living room, maybe a week into the lockdown, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders like I was being buried alive. My name is Sam, and I had always been the type of person who thrived on routine, working from home when I was given the chance, taking my daily strolls to the coffee shop just 2 blocks away, and settling into my cozy chair every evening to read or binge watch whatever captivating show I could find. The silence that enveloped my neighborhood during those first few days of the COVID lockdown felt almost foreign. It was like the world had pressed pause on the very fabric of our lives, and what should have been a simple moment of quiet turned into an unsettling void that echoed in my chest. My phone buzzed incessantly with news updates, family group chats, and the occasional Zoom invitation, further drawing me into a vortex of uncertainty, but I didn't want to join those calls. I didn't want to see smiling faces that felt haunted by the anxiety we all shared. What was meant to be a temporary setback had soon launched me into what felt like a living nightmare, my isolation only deepening as the days rolled into weeks. But as the months passed, I slowly began to adapt to this strange new reality. I started sharing my thoughts on Reddit, joining various communities to find solace among strangers, pouring out my feelings about the lockdowns, and sharing my experiences of loneliness and frustration. That's where I met Lucy, someone who felt equally lost and bewildered by it all. She lived several states away, her life similarly altered. Our conversations drifted from light banter to deeper reflections about loss and hope. Sharing snippets of our daily lives became our safe haven. She talked about her love for painting and the vibrant colors that often eluded her during the lockdowns, while I found comfort in her words and began putting my thoughts onto paper. What had started as a way to escape turned into a blossoming friendship. We began video chatting nightly, our laughter filling what had once been an empty void. The refracted sunlight streaming through my window as I sat on the floor with my laptop felt warm. It illuminated not only my space but also the corners of my heart that had dimmed. I had not anticipated feeling this connection during a time rife with uncertainty. Yet, as time marched on, I found myself wrestling with something I hadn't expected, the weight of a burgeoning affection for Lucy. It was undeniable, and with every shared late-night confession, my heart ached with the gravity of feelings unspoken. Would revealing my feelings jeopardize the solace we'd built together? The internal conflict tugged at my mind incessantly. I didn't want to ruin the one thing that had brought color back into my life, and still, I longed to tell her just how much she meant to me. One evening, as we talked about the future and the world reopening, I felt the courage swell within me like the tides swelling under the moonlight. In a raw moment of honesty, I confessed my feelings and admitted the delicate dance of hope that had taken hold of my heart. To my relief, she was quiet for a moment, and then smiled, her eyes sparkling with the very same vulnerability. It turned out she had felt the spark too, unsure how to voice it amid the chaos surrounding us. As the lockdowns began to lift and the world cautiously re-emerged from the shadows, so did our friendship blossom into something more profound. We planned to meet, finally collapsing the distance that had once kept us apart. That day arrived, the sun shining brightly in stark contrast to the rain clouds of the past year, and I remember pacing nervously in a small park where we agreed to meet. When I saw her walking toward me, there was an electrifying jolt in the air as if time had paused for just a moment. The laughter and love we had built from screens now resonated through the rustling of leaves and the soft chirping of birds around us. The discussions that spanned evenings and wrapped around our hearts became rich conversations in person, and in those quiet moments, I realized how much I had yearned for human connection. We embraced, and it felt as if I was breathing life for the first time after gasping for air. Reflecting now, it's surreal to think about how COVID was a catalyst, a strange and terrifying tragedy that somehow led me to Lucy, who now stands by my side as we navigate this post-lockdown era together. Life shifted dramatically during those months, and when I envision that time, I think of more than just isolation. I think of finding love, rediscovering passion and creativity, and rekindling the simple joys like the warmth of laughter. And to answer that imagined question in 25 years about life during the lockdown, I'll say it was during those dark days that I found the light in unexpected places, and, more importantly, within myself, igniting a flame that continues to burn, reminding me that even the darkest of nights can lead to a brilliant dawn. Update: a few months later, Lucy and I are doing well together, our bond stronger than ever. We've even started collaborating on some artistic projects, blending her painting with my writing, and it feels incredible to work side by side, creating new worlds together. As the world around us seems to find its rhythm again, I remain ever grateful for the quiet moments that led me to this exhilarating chapter of life, and I often remind myself that sometimes, amidst chaos, you can stumble into something beautiful and unexpected. As I sit here in the soft morning light filtering through our cluttered studio, I can't help but reflect on how far we've come since those uncertain days of lockdown. The space is filled with the heady scent of paint and freshly brewed coffee, a mixture that feels like home now, and it's easy to forget that just a few months ago, even stepping outside felt like a gamble. Lucy is perched on her stool, her paintbrush dancing across the canvas, lost in her world of colors and textures while I type furiously on my laptop, trying to capture the essence of our journey in words. There's an unspoken understanding between us, a rhythm that seems to sync our creative energies into a harmonious flow, and I often pause to watch her. The way her brow furrows in concentration and the soft smile that breaks through when she's particularly pleased with a stroke reminds me of everything we've learned in the chaos of those months apart. Our bond was forged in that strange silence of the lockdown, when we were forced to face ourselves and the depth of our emotions. Even when the world outside grew louder with conflicting narratives and demands for normalcy, Lucy and I carved out our own little sanctuary, one filled with art, laughter, and honest conversations. I can still recall the tension of those early days, the screen time stretching endlessly, the dread of the unknown gnawing at my stomach, and the conversations that oscillated between overly optimistic and painfully honest. I remember one evening in particular, where the weight of isolation hung heavy in the air. Lucy had called me, worry draping her voice like a thick fog. She spoke of loneliness, of dreams deferred, and fears bubbling just below the surface. I listened, feeling helpless from afar, but it was in this raw exchange that we unearthed our shared insecurities, and both of us started to voice the longing for connection. Slowly, we began a ritual of sorts. Every evening at 6, we would meet virtually, sharing snippets of our days, our worries, and our hopes, gradually stitching the gaping holes that distance created in our hearts. The soft glow from our screens became a lifeline. Over time, conversations turned into creative exchanges, and before I knew it, we were nurturing something that went beyond friendship. The moment we decided to collaborate, it felt like a blossoming flower, effortlessly unfolding, revealing colors and patterns we never knew existed. Once we began blending our arts, her vibrant, swirling colors complementing my stories that danced with emotion, we uncovered a new facet of our relationship. Each painting sparked a narrative, each poem inspired a vivid scene, and it felt as if we were building a bridge from our separate lives to one shared together, alive with inspiration. Today, as I watch her mix cobalt blue with hints of emerald, I can't shake off the gratitude that washes over me. I realize that those long, isolating nights ultimately gifted us with clarity, to see each other not only as creators but as partners navigating this unpredictable world. I wouldn't change a thing. As our brushes glide across the canvases, Lucy meets my gaze, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "Did you think the lockdown would lead to us being an art duo?" she asks, and I chuckle, shaking my head. I never saw the turning points as clearly back then, lost as I was in the noise of uncertainty. Now, with each stroke shared between us, I'm awash in the beauty of this unexpected journey. I muse over where we will go from here, as life continues to ebb and flow beyond the four walls of our studio. There are projects we hope to pursue together, displays at local galleries, eventually a joint exhibition where our creations can converse with each other in a shared space. Perhaps even a published collection, where her art meets my words, a testament of our intertwined paths forged through adversity. And on days when the world feels overwhelming, I find comfort in reminding myself that our bond emerged from that stillness, that even from chaos, we can arrive at harmony. As I finish my thoughts, the soft chime of Lucy's laughter drifts through the air, followed by the gentle swishing of her paintbrush. Just then, I feel a stir of anticipation, a realization that whatever life has in store for us next, we will embrace it together, as a team, holding on to the knowledge that even the most daunting circumstances can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, our little sanctuary of creativity flourished, much like the vibrant blossoms sprouting in the garden outside our window. The sunlight poured into our shared space, illuminating the canvas that had begun to sprout Lucy's imaginative strokes, while my words transformed into stories that danced around her art, creating a tapestry of color and emotion. I still remember the day we decided to tackle something new together. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world seemed to hold its breath, and everything beyond our walls faded away. An impulsive idea took root amidst our laughter. Let's create a children's book filled with whimsical tales and striking illustrations, tales that could whisk young readers away to fantastical realms where anything was possible. But as the proposal took shape, so did a wave of uncertainty wash over me. What if the story I wove wasn't good enough for her art? What if my words overshadowed her beautiful brushwork, or worse, became flat under the weight of her brilliance? I watched her with wonder, her subject matter shifting fluidly between animals, landscapes, and whimsical creatures, each piece brimming with joy, and I couldn't help but question whether I was worthy of sharing this labor of love with someone so gifted. All of this churned inside me, a silent struggle against the rising tide of my own insecurities, until one evening, unable to contain it anymore, I laid my concerns bare, the vulnerability raking over me like a chill wind. "Lucy," I whispered, catching her mid-stroke, "what if my writing isn't enough to match your art? What if I ruin it?" She paused, met my gaze with her vivid eyes that held challenges and reassurances in equal measure, and said, "But it won't be about adequate or inadequate, it'll be about us, about our story. We're crafting something uniquely ours." In those words, like a gentle tide washing away the remnants of my doubt, I felt a surge of excitement swell within me. Our project wasn't merely a collaboration, it was a blend of our souls, forged from the fragility of uncertainty yet buoyed by the strength of companionship. So we dove in headfirst, spending countless hours immersed in inspiration, often losing track of time as we shared ideas and sketches, our laughter echoing through the cozy corners of our home. The world outside resumed its relentless pace, but within our bubble, we existed in a realm of creativity that felt blissfully untouched by chaos. As the book began to take shape, I found a rhythm, a harmonious connection emerging not only through our art and stories but in the deeper understanding of one another that we nurtured. During this time, I realized just how much I had feared vulnerability. I had barricaded myself behind walls built from self-doubt, never realizing how stifling and solitary those walls made me feel. In those late hours, bathed in the warm glow of string lights we had hung above our workspace, Lucy and I unraveled and stitched back together, revealing fragments of our pasts and dreams that previously lay dormant. One night, while we took a break, sprawled out on our living room floor, I felt an overwhelming urge to put pen to paper and write a letter addressed to the future readers of our book, a message filled with hope and encouragement for children who might feel lost or lonely, just as I had felt for a long time. It became a love letter not just to them, but to our journey, defining the importance of authenticity and the magic born from shared creativity amidst uncertainty. That moment felt like a revelation, as if all the noise of the outside world melted away, leaving only the soft whisper of possibility in its wake. As we neared completion of our project, excitement blended seamlessly with nostalgia. I knew this endeavor would leave an imprint on my life, just as the lockdown had done, allowing me the space to reflect, grow, and ultimately, find my creative voice. And then came the day when we finally held the finished book in our hands, our combined efforts manifested between the covers. It was surreal, The colors seemed to leap off the pages, and the words danced in tandem with the illustrations, a perfect testament to how far we had come since that initial bonding over comfortable silence. My heart soared as I looked into Lucy's eyes, her pride reflected in a radiant smile that lit up her entire face. It was in that moment I understood that I was not just embracing what lay ahead but also honoring the beautiful past that had brought us together. As I ponder my experiences during those isolation days, I find solace reflecting that remarkable connection, one that blossomed from quiet homes and simple conversations, reminding me that amidst unknowns lie the seeds of unforgettable stories, woven together in love, creativity, and collaboration. And now, every time someone asks about the lockdown years, I can smile, not just because of the chaos that once filled the air, but because of the unexplored beauty it unearthed, something that continues to inspire us, urging me to create and dream, hand in hand with the person who taught me how to see magic in the mundane. It was one of those Saturday afternoons where the sun seemed to hang a little lower in the sky, bathing everything in a warm golden light. I was just wrapping up my shift at the local diner, exhausted but oddly content. I had spent the day serving coffee and pancakes to the usual crowd, a familiar mix of regulars and unfamiliar faces. As I tossed my apron aside and climbed into my old truck, the smell of grease and syrup lingered, a strange comfort after a long shift. My plan was simple. A quick trip to the recycling center with a collection of cans I had saved up. I didn't think much of it, a handful of aluminum from my kitchen and the diner combined, a tiny contribution to my Friday night cleanup ritual. But as I parked in front of the recycling center, I noticed a woman standing by my truck, her eyes darting around like a squirrel on caffeine. Maybe it was the weariness of the day, or perhaps a rush of instinct, but something about her felt off. Still, I brushed it aside, pulled out my phone to scroll mindlessly through social media while I waited. A few moments passed before I looked up to see her rummaging in the back of my truck, lifting the bag of cans as if it were the Holy Grail. My heart dropped. "Hey! What are you doing?" I yelled, more out of shock than anger. I should have just let it go, but something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the day overriding my sleep-deprived brain, but I jumped out of the truck, my feet hitting the pavement with purpose. "That's mine." I found myself standing there, half expecting her to drop the bag and flee. But she turned to face me, and that's when I noticed the lines on her face, the weariness in her eyes that mirrored my own. "It's just cans," she shrugged, her voice sharp yet tinged with an edge of desperation. I felt a rush of sympathy mingling with my anger. Maybe she was struggling, maybe these cans were worth more to her than to me. Yet I thought back to how hard I worked for those pennies, each can a testament to my efforts. "I get it," I said, softer now, trying to find common ground. "But they're mine. I need to take them to recycling." The tension in the air was palpable, like rubber bands stretched to their limit. For a moment, we both stood there, two strangers caught up in an unwinnable standoff. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature. I often preferred to drift through the world rather than disturb the status quo, but here I was, presenting a challenge. Something flickered in her eyes, a mixture of anger, shame, and maybe a hint of vulnerability. "This is how I pay for my kids' lunch," she blurted out, her voice cracking. My heart softened further, each beat echoing doubt in my mind. Was I an asshole for wanting to stand my ground? Was I denying her the means to survive? I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize it all. "I'm sure you're struggling. I get it. But I can't just give this to you." We hovered in this uncomfortable limbo, the weight of her desperation palpable. The bags of cans and my anger felt so trivial in the face of her honesty. I felt torn, split between being protective of my meager possessions and recognizing a need that resonated deep within my own heart. In a moment that felt like an eternity, I decided to compromise. "How about this? I'll help you gather more cans, and you can take any we find together. I could use an extra set of hands." The tension peaked for a split second, then slowly began to unravel. Her brow furrowed in disbelief as if trying to gauge my sincerity. "You wouldn't just call the cops?" she asked, her body relaxing but still cautious. I shook my head. "No, I won't. We're just two people trying to get by." In the end, we spent the next half hour combing through the neighborhood, collecting discarded cans. As we gathered our bounty, we talked. I learned her name was Maggie and that she was a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She was filled with laughter that sounded both weary and hopeful. I realized that my earlier irritation was so small compared to the stories people were carrying, including my own. When we finished, we looked at our small haul, and I dug into my pocket to pull out a $10 bill. "Here. Just for today," I said, feeling a warmth build in my chest. This might not be much, but go buy those kids a few sandwiches. Maggie hesitated for a moment, then accepted the money, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, and for the first time that day, I felt something within me lift, a sort of lightness that came from sharing the burden. I drove away that day with my heart heavier yet somehow also free, reflecting on how sometimes standing your ground could mean building a bridge instead. Months later, I still think about that afternoon. Did it fix everything? No. Did I get my cans back? Well, I learned to look beyond those cans for a moment, beyond possessions and comfort. I guess the world isn't just about fighting to protect what's yours. Sometimes, it's about recognizing what you can give up and seeing how far kindness can stretch, even if it comes from unexpected places. In a way, we both walked away with something that day, just not what we initially thought we needed. It's funny how life teaches you lessons in the most unpredictable ways. That day with the woman and my bag of cans shifted something deep within me, though the overt changes weren't immediate. I still had that tiny moment etched in my memory, the way her eyes briefly lit up when I handed her a couple of dollars, how taken aback she was when I told her to keep the cans. I had expected anger, had braced myself for her indignation when I confronted her about the theft, but the twist caught me off guard. Instead, I found a person who was just as lost in the world as I sometimes felt. It occurred to me that maybe what I saw as a desperate act of theft was part of a larger story I didn't know. I recalled her dirty hands, her weathered face, and the sadness that lingered like a shadow. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself reflecting on our encounter more often than I'd like to admit. Initially, I tried to justify my actions, clinging to my right to get my property back, convinced that I was in the right. But gradually, my grip on that sense of righteousness loosened. I would drive by the same corner where she had taken the cans, and I began to wonder about her life, who she was outside of that moment. Did she have friends? Was she okay? Occasionally, I'd see others like her, standing on the streets, carrying their circumstances like a heavy load, and I felt an urge to engage, to ask if they were all right. One night, on my way home from a late shift, I stopped at a local diner. It was nothing fancy but had decent burgers and endless coffee. As I was finishing my meal, a woman approached me, an all too familiar look in her eyes. It was her, the woman from the truck. My heart raced. She looked different, more alert, perhaps. I could see the scarring from whatever struggle she was battling, but there was also resilience in her expression. I wasn't sure if she recognized me, but I decided to take the leap. I smiled and said, "Hey, it's you. From the corner. With the cans." She blinked, a flash of recognition crossing her face before she hid it. "Yeah, I remember," she replied, a mix of pride and discomfort in her voice. I could sense the walls she'd built were still towering high. Yet, it didn't end there. We ended up talking for an hour over greasy fries, and I learned more about her circumstances than I anticipated. Her name was Rachel, and she had been struggling for years, trying to make ends meet in a world that kept kicking her when she was down. I shared bits about my life too, my own failures and frustrations, finding common threads of struggle and resilience that bridged the social gap between us. As we shared stories, I began to see humanity in Rachel, and she in me. What started as a moment of conflict turned into a profound connection. I was astonished at how little a person sometimes needs to feel heard. I offered her a few more dollars, insisting it was for a meal, nothing more, and she hesitated but took it. Our exchange felt interwoven with something rich and unspoken, the air humming with unacknowledged understanding. Months later, when I think about that day, I realize it was more than reclaiming my bag of cans or sorting out who was right or wrong. It had spiraled into something beautiful, showing me that sometimes standing your ground means building a bridge instead. I don't always see her, but whenever I do catch a glimpse of her, there's a nod of recognition that passes between us, a silent agreement grounded in empathy. It's strange how kindness can spread like ripples in a pond, starting from a simple act that feels so mundane in the grand scope of life. Little by little, I learned to look beyond possessions, and in doing so, I discovered the true essence of what it means to care for others, and that, perhaps, was the greatest reward of all. I still remember the first time I saw her again after that day by my truck. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind of day that pulls the colors out of the world, making everything look muted and gray. I was walking home from work, my mind tangled in thoughts about the week ahead, meetings that felt pointless and deadlines looming like storm clouds. Just as I turned the corner, I saw her huddled under a bus stop awning, the same worn-out jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. For a moment, I hesitated. Was she still that woman who had taken my bags of cans? I thought about the anger and fear that had welled up in me when I'd confronted her, how I had been ready to yell, ready to proclaim my territory. But now, as I stood there watching her count something in her lap, maybe a few stray coins, maybe hopes for the day, I felt that old tension fade away. Instead of crossing the street to avoid her, I walked closer. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, as if the weight of our previous encounter didn't hang in the air between us. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. "I remember you." The way she said it sent a rush of unexpected warmth through me. I caught her eye and nodded. There was no animosity this time, only a shared moment that acknowledged our past. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, the rain drizzling down and inviting us both into a more intimate conversation. "Waiting for a friend," she replied, her voice sounding small yet steady. Not sure what I was thinking, honestly. I glanced at the bus schedule, then back at her. "Want to grab a coffee? There's a little place just down the street." She hesitated, biting her lip, and I could sense her internal struggle. This wasn't the typical interaction you'd have in a city, especially with someone you had a rocky history with. But she did something surprising. She nodded, and that felt like a bridge between us, even if it was fragile. As we settled into a small booth at the cafe, the scent of fresh brewing coffee wrapping around us, I learned her name, Maya. It turned out her world was much darker than I had guessed. She shared stories of losing a job and stumbling into hard times, realities that were stark and raw. I thought about the anger that had bubbled within me when she'd taken what was mine, completely ignorant of what was happening in her world. "Look, I know what I did was wrong," she said quietly, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with her finger, "but it wasn't just about the cans. I wasn't thinking straight. I was desperate." Her honesty hit me like a cold splash of water. I had spent most of my adult life pinching pennies, too, and it made me question how I would have reacted in her shoes. "What do you do when the world turns its back?" "I get it," I said slowly. "I really do. But there's no shame in asking for help." That seemed to resonate with her. We talked for hours, two people who had been strangers, now sharing bits and pieces of their lives over steaming mugs. She was funny and insightful, and I started to see the glimmer of hope in her eyes, a light that had been dimmed but wasn't entirely extinguished. By the time we parted ways, that nod I had used to recognize her before became a wave, an acknowledgement that we were both just trying to navigate our way through life's complications. In the months that followed, our encounters became more frequent. Sometimes she'd call if she needed a referral for a job. Other times, I'd see her at the same bus stop, and we'd share quick laughs about life's absurdities. It didn't always lead to deep conversations or outstretching help, but the familiarity felt comforting, a reminder that human connections could blossom from the most unexpected circumstances. Reflecting back on it all, I learned something critical: we all have our battles, our shabby jackets we wear to shield ourselves from the world. But maybe what makes our journeys worthwhile is not just the things we gather along the way, those cans, those ambitions, but the people we meet and the finite moments when we open ourselves to understanding. I never got those bags of cans back, but, honestly, I've come to realize that sometimes what you think you need pales in comparison to understanding someone else's struggle. We both gained something that day we stepped out from behind our defenses, and as I walked home that night feeling lighter, I knew that bridge between us was something I'd treasure far more than any material possession.